Good evening, listener. Somewhere, beyond the hum of streetlights and the quiet pulse of the sleeping city, there are stories that refuse to die. Stories about the unseen, about things that slip through the cracks of reason and take root in ordinary lives. Tonight, you're tuning in to Night Frequencies, where every broadcast carries a frequency that isn't meant to be heard, and yet, you're still listening. They say truth hides in static, and fear lives in the spaces between our breaths. So breathe slow, because every tale you're about to hear once began like any other day and ended with something impossible. Welcome to Little Dream, the blood bloom of room 403. Sometimes the strangest things begin with something too small to notice. A drop of water, a stain that won't go away, or a color that seems to bleed where it shouldn't. And that's how Chloe remembered it the first night she saw the red water. Room 403 wasn't haunted, not in any official sense. It was just old part of the university's east wing that still smelled faintly of paint and dust, like memories that never dried. The radiator hissed whenever someone on the floor turned on their sink, and the walls trembled faintly when the subway passed 3 blocks below. It wasn't a place you'd call comfortable, but it had character. Chloe liked that. Or at least she used to. It started with the sink. She and her roommate Maya had finished a long day of classes, both exhausted, both half asleep, in the yellow dorm light that never quite reached the corners of the ceiling. Maya was brushing her teeth when she frowned and said softly, "Hey, did you spill something in here?" Chloe leaned over. At first, she thought it was rust, a thin reddish smear along the porcelain basin. But when she ran her thumb over it, the streak spread, a diluted crimson that swirled in the running water like a petal unfolding. "It's probably the pipes," Chloe murmured. "This building's ancient." "Yeah," Maya said. "Ancient pipes don't smell like iron." The water drained, leaving a faint pink film. They cleaned it with paper towels. By morning, it was back. The dorm smelled like rain that week cold. Metallic rain that slid down the cracked windows and soaked into the wood beneath. Chloe could hear it in her dreams. The drip, 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 slow and measured, as though counting something. Ben was supposed to call her that night. He didn't. They'd been engaged for almost a year. A quiet, soft kind of love that had grown out of shared loneliness during freshman year. But lately he'd been distant, his messages short, his voice strange when she reached him. "I just need some time," he'd said. "Work trip. Don't wait up." She didn't wait up, but she didn't sleep either. At 2 in the morning, she heard it again. The dripping not from the sink this time, but from the ceiling. When she flicked on the bathroom light, there it was. A slow thread of red water trailing from the vent above the mirror, tracing a thin line across the glass before falling into the sink. She watched the droplet quiver at the edge of her reflection, and for just a second, she thought she saw something move a shadow behind the mirror, as though the reflection had blinked when she hadn't. She stepped closer. The air smelled faintly of metal and damp silk. Her phone buzzed a text from Ben. "Ben. Sorry. Busy night. Can't talk. Love you." She stared at the screen, her heart catching on the word love. It felt distant, like it had been copied and pasted. Behind her, the dripping stopped. When she looked up again, the mirror was clear. Only the faintest red line remained, curving down toward the drain, like the stem of a flower. The next morning, Maya found her in the kitchen corner, staring into her coffee. "You okay?" "Just tired," Chloe muttered. "You look pale. Did you see the sink?" "Yeah, I cleaned it again." Maya hesitated. It came back. They exchanged a look, that quiet, nervous glance people share when they both know something's wrong but can't name it. "Maybe we should tell maintenance?" "Sure," Chloe said, though she didn't move. It was raining again. Outside the window, puddles glistened like dark mirrors. Maya reached for her cup and stopped halfway. "Chloe, do you ever feel like this room is cold? Like colder than the hallway?" Chloe nodded slowly. The air seemed heavier here. Sometimes, at night, she'd wake with her fingers numb, breath fogging faintly in the dark. She'd blame the draft from the window, but now she wasn't sure. The radiator hissed softly, as if exhaling. That evening, as they studied in silence, Chloe noticed something strange on the floor. Near the bathroom door, the linoleum shimmered with a faint pink sheen, a small puddle that hadn't been there before. She bent down, pressing a tissue to it. It came away red. "Maya," she whispered, "it's back." "Where?" "Everywhere." They scrubbed the floor until the bleach stung their eyes, but the stain clung stubbornly to the cracks. Later, when Chloe stood under the shower, steam fogging the air, she thought she smelled something sweet faint, like crushed petals. She leaned her head against the tile, eyes closed, letting the water run down her neck. For a moment, she thought she heard a soft sizzling sound, like the drain was whispering. When she looked down, the water swirling at her feet was tinged with red. She turned off the tap. The noise continued: sizzle, drip, hiss, a quiet, rhythmic breath from beneath the pipes. Something shifting, something alive. She backed away slowly, water dripping from her hair. The mirror was fogged, but in the condensation, she saw a shape, a faint outline, as if someone had pressed their palm to the other side of the glass. And in the center of that ghostly handprint, a single red petal slid down the surface, leaving a thin streak behind. Some people say buildings remember pain. They soak it into their walls. They breathe it through their pipes. Maybe that's all ghosts really are, memories that learned how to bleed. For the next few days, Chloe tried to pretend that nothing had changed. She went to class, turned in her essays, laughed when people made jokes. Yet every time she washed her hands, she found herself glancing at the mirror above the sink, half expecting to see that faint red shimmer again. It never appeared while Maya was around. Only when she was alone, when the hallway outside felt quiet and the old pipes groaned, would the reflection seem to move just slightly slower than her. One evening, Maya came back from the showers down the hall, her hair damp and tangled. She said, almost offhandedly, "You're not going to believe what I saw." Chloe looked up from her laptop. "What?" "There's something in our bathroom. I swear I saw it." "What do you mean, something?" Maya hesitated, searching for the words. It looked like a flower, a rose, dark red, just sitting on the edge of the sink. "I thought it was yours, but when I blinked, it was gone." Chloe stared at her. "A flower?" Maya nodded, uneasy, like it was growing there. Chloe forced a smile, but her chest felt tight. "You probably imagined it." "Yeah, maybe," Maya murmured. "I've been having weird dreams lately." "You?" Chloe didn't answer. She had. Every night, she dreamed of a dripping sound, and of something blooming slowly in the dark petals unfurling, wet and heavy. Each time she woke, she found her shoulder damp with sweat, her pulse racing. Sometimes she thought she could still smell roses, faintly sweet and metallic. The following morning, she caught her reflection laughing. She was standing in front of the bathroom mirror, brushing her teeth, when she noticed a tiny delay between her movement and the reflections. Her hand lifted the toothbrush, but in the mirror, it lifted just after, almost imperceptibly. When she blinked, the reflection didn't. Instead, its lips curled upward, the corners of its mouth stretching into a smile that wasn't hers. The toothbrush slipped from her fingers, clattering into the sink. She stepped back, pressing against the wall, eyes locked on the mirror. The other Chloe didn't move. For a second, it just stared at her with that thin, frozen grin. Then, as the light flickered overhead, the image returned to normal. When Maya walked in, Chloe was still standing there, pale and shaking. "Are you okay?" Chloe forced a nod. "Yeah, just dizzy." Maya frowned, then looked toward the mirror. "Huh, is that on your shoulder?" Chloe turned. There was a small bruise near her collarbone, round and faintly red, like a rose petal pressed into her skin. "It wasn't there before," Maya said quietly. "It's nothing," Chloe murmured, though her voice trembled. "Maybe I hit something," but she couldn't remember hitting anything. That night, she couldn't stop touching it. The spot was cool, almost damp, as if something beneath the skin pulsed faintly, breathing. When she pressed it, a tingling shot through her arm, half pain, half numbness. She covered it with a bandage and told herself it was fine. Ben called just before midnight. He sounded distant, his voice full of static. "Chloe, I'm sorry I didn't call. Things got messy here." She tried to keep her tone light. "Where are you?" "Still in Albany." "Look, can we talk when I get back? You're acting strange." There was a pause. "I just need a few days." Before she could ask anything else, the line crackled, and he was gone. She stared at the phone until the screen went dark, her reflection faintly visible in the glass. For a moment, she could have sworn it smiled again. Sleep wouldn't come. She sat at her desk, watching the faint moonlight stretch across the carpet. The room smelled faintly of metal again. When she turned toward the window, she saw condensation on the glass, though the air was dry. In the blurred reflection of the night outside, she thought she saw someone standing behind her, just a shadow, a smudge of movement. But when she turned, the room was empty. The bruise on her shoulder had grown darker, almost crimson now. The skin around it pulsed faintly, like something beneath was trying to surface. She ran her fingers over it and drew back sharply. Her fingertips came away wet, smeared with something that wasn't blood but glistened red all the same. She stumbled into the bathroom, heart hammering. Under the harsh white light, she peeled off the bandage. The mark wasn't flat anymore. It had texture, delicate petal-like ridges curling outward. Her skin around it was cold, clammy, and faintly fragrant. Her reflection leaned closer than she did. For a long moment, she couldn't breathe. The mirror Chloe was watching her with eyes that seemed too bright, too knowing. Its lips parted, and though no sound came out, she could read them perfectly. "Do you see it now?" Her hand trembled. What are you?" she whispered. The reflection tilted its head, the same way Ben used to when teasing her. Then it smiled wider. The bruised petals on her shoulder darkened, as if answering that smile. Something deep in her chest began to ache. Not fear exactly, but a sense of recognition, of something old and angry stirring awake. She fled to her bed, pulling the sheets over her head like a child hiding from the dark. Beneath the blanket, her breath came in shallow bursts, but even there, with her eyes closed tight, she could feel a faint, wet warmth against her shoulder, spreading slowly, like a bloom opening in the dark. When dawn came, she found the mirror covered in a thin film of moisture. Across the fogged glass, someone had drawn a perfect circle, and in its center, a single red petal had been pressed against the surface, flattened, almost translucent. She touched it. It dissolved under her fingertip, leaving a stain that wouldn't wash off. The morning light made everything look normal again, almost cruelly so. The stain on the mirror had faded. The petal was gone. The air smelled of soap and warm dust, not roses. But Chloe knew better. Maya had already left for class. The room felt emptier, without her quiet in the way only old dormitories can be, where the silence hums faintly, like something alive beneath the walls. Chloe sat at her desk, staring at her phone. Ben hadn't called back. His last message sat unopened in the notifications bar, a single unread dot that felt heavier than it should. She reached for it, hesitated, then opened it. "Ben, if anyone asks about Anya, tell them you never met her." Chloe froze. The name meant nothing to her. Or at least, it should have. But the moment she read it, a flicker of something stirred at the edge of her memory. A faint image she couldn't quite place. A woman's face? A photograph? The smell of perfume? It was like remembering a dream you weren't sure you'd had. She typed back quickly. "Chloe, who's Anya?" The message showed delivered but not read. By afternoon, she was restless. Her shoulder throbbed dully under the fabric of her sweater, the pain spreading in slow pulses. She tried to distract herself, laundry, reading, scrolling through her phone, but every reflection she passed seemed slightly wrong. The shimmer of her screen, the window glass, even the surface of her coffee, all of them carried a faint distortion, as though something beneath was trying to surface. When Maya came back that evening, she looked uneasy. "You've been here all day?" she asked. "Yeah. There was a girl asking about you in the cafeteria." Chloe looked up. "What girl?" "I don't know. Dark hair, pale. She said she used to live in this building. Wanted to know if you got her old room." Chloe's stomach turned cold. "Did she say her name?" "I think she said Anya." They stared at each other. The air in the room felt heavier, as if the name itself had changed the temperature. "I didn't tell her anything," Maya said quickly. "She left before I could." "Did she?" Chloe's voice faltered. "Did she look okay?" Maya frowned. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were strange. That night, Chloe searched the university student forum. The results came slowly: outdated photos, event posts, a few random names. Then she found it. Anya Lermont, class of 2022. Art major, member of the campus photography club. Her profile picture showed a girl with black hair and a sharp smile standing beside a row of darkroom photos. In the caption, she'd written, "Every picture is a promise." Chloe scrolled further. The post stopped abruptly a year ago. The final update was from another user. "In memory of Anya Lermont, 1999, 2023. You'll be missed." Her pulse quickened. She clicked through the comments. There weren't many: a few shocked replies, a few condolences. One stood out. She shouldn't have gone back to him. Another said she tried to warn his fiancée. He never told her the truth. Chloe's stomach knotted. She scrolled faster, hands trembling. Finally, she found a thread buried beneath old gossip, one that began with a grainy photo of a woman's hand holding a red flower. The caption read, "She sent it to her." She didn't need to ask who her was. She already knew. The memory hit her like a cold wave, an envelope from an unknown sender arriving 3 months ago. Inside, a dried red petal pressed flat against paper. No note, no return address. She had shown it to Ben. He'd gone pale, then smiled too quickly and said, "Probably a prank." Now she knew it wasn't. She leaned back in her chair, feeling sick. The room tilted slightly, the edges blurring. Her phone buzzed in her lap. It was Ben finally calling. She answered before thinking. "Ben," she said, her voice cracking. He was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his tone was low, brittle. "You got it, didn't you? The flower? She sent one to you too?" Chloe swallowed hard. "Who was she, Ben?" "She was someone I met before you. It was over, I swear. But she didn't accept it." Chloe's hand tightened around the phone. "You lied to me. I was trying to protect you." "From what?" Ben hesitated. "From her. She wasn't stable. She did something to herself after I left. She wanted me to see what I'd done. She said she'd make sure I never forgot her. And then she sent..." He stopped. "Forget it. You don't want to know. Tell me." "She sent me a photograph of my reflection. Only it wasn't mine anymore." Chloe's throat went dry. "What do you mean?" It was smiling, just like hers. The line hissed faintly, as though something was breathing on the other end. "Ben, what did you do to her?" His voice broke. "I thought she was gone. I thought it ended with her. But if you got the flower, Chloe, listen to me. Don't look in the mirror. Don't touch the bruise. Whatever you do." The call cut off. Chloe sat frozen, the silence pressing in. The hum of the lights sounded distant. Her shoulder burned. She stood and went to the bathroom, almost against her will. The mirror was spotless, the air still. For a moment, she thought she'd imagined everything. Then the light flickered. The glass shimmered not like reflection, but like water, trembling gently. Beneath the surface, she saw movement, a ripple of red spreading outward, a shape of a woman's face forming slowly behind her own. Chloe stepped back, but the image followed. The woman's skin looked blistered, melted in places. Her eyes glowed faintly, her mouth moving though no sound came. Her hair floated, black strands twisting like roots underwater. The red bruise on Chloe's shoulder pulsed in answer. It didn't feel like pain anymore. It felt like connection. The woman smiled, a smile torn and uneven, and whispered a name that Chloe could feel but not hear. She pressed her palm to the glass, and on the other side, the reflection did the same. When their hands met, the mirror grew cold. A single droplet of crimson slid down the surface between them, curling like the stem of a flower. The lock on the bathroom door clicked shut on its own. Chloe spun around, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the sink. The mirror in front of her rippled like the surface of water, distorting her reflection into something unrecognizable. Her breath fogged up the glass, but the figure behind the mist didn't move with her. Her reflection tilted its head, eyes wide, a smile unfurling slowly, painfully across its lips. Then Chloe felt it, a pulse beneath her skin, a heartbeat that wasn't her own. She looked down at her shoulder. The faint red bruise that had been there for days now throbbed violently. The skin bubbled, blistered, then split open. Something dark pushed through. She screamed as the flesh tore apart, and from the wound blossomed a flower, its petals slick, glistening crimson, veins twitching like living worms. The stem rooted itself deep beneath her skin, spreading through her collarbone, down her arm. She could feel it growing inside her, feeding off her heartbeat. In the mirror, her reflection reached up and stroked its own shoulder. And then, from within the glass, Anya appeared. Her face was burned, melted on one side like candle wax, yet her remaining eye glimmered with something almost tender. Her lips parted, whispering, "He made me from lies and pain. And you kept me alive with your love for him." Chloe backed away, shaking her head violently. No, I didn't." Anya's voice deepened, overlapping, multiplied as if hundreds of whispers echoed behind her. "He buried me, but he couldn't bury what he created." The mirror began to crack, lines branching outward like spiderwebs. From every fracture seeped red liquid, thick and metallic. Blood trickled down the glass, pooling onto the sink. Chloe fell to her knees, clawing at the vine that now coiled down her arm. The roots sank deeper each time she touched it, sending electric pain through her chest. Then came a sound. Bang! Ben's voice from behind the door. Chloe, open the door." She could barely breathe. The vines had reached her throat. Anya's voice came again, soft, broken. "He killed me to be free. Now you'll understand what that feels like." The mirror shuddered violently, then exploded outward. Glass and blood rained across the tiles. Ben burst through the door just in time to see Chloe kneeling in the center of the floor, the flower now fully open across her shoulder and chest. Its petals trembled with each of her ragged breaths. "Ben," she gasped, reaching for him. He froze. His eyes widened, not at her, but at what was growing behind her. From the mirror's shattered frame, a shape was emerging. Anya, or what was left of her. Her body was made of twisting stems and blood-drenched petals, her face half-formed from shards of mirror. She stepped forward, barefoot on the wet tiles. "Ben," she whispered, "you said you'd love me until the last flower dies." Ben's knees gave out. "Please, don't." Anya turned to Chloe, her burned face softening. "He's yours, but what grows in your body belongs to me." Chloe screamed as the flower burst open again, petals spilling outward in a spray of blood. Her veins blackened, her eyes rolled back. Ben lunged toward her, but the moment he touched her, the vines lashed around his wrists, dragging him toward the mirror. "Kill me!" he screamed. "She's innocent." Chloe tried to speak, but her mouth filled with the taste of iron and dirt. Ben's body convulsed as the vines wrapped around his neck. His scream cut short. Ben snapped. Everything went silent. When the silence finally broke, it was with the sound of soft dripping. The mirror was whole again. The flower on Chloe's shoulder had vanished, and in her reflection Anya was smiling. At first, Chloe didn't realize she was awake. Everything around her was soft and fluid, as though the air had turned to water. She felt the coolness of tile beneath her cheek, the faint sting of something damp pressing against her shoulder. When she tried to move, a dull ache spread across her back, heavy and deep like roots twisting just beneath her skin. The light above her flickered once, twice, and then steadied into a pale, humming glow. Room 403. Still. Too still. "Maya?" she whispered, though her throat felt raw, as if she had swallowed dust. The echo came back smaller, swallowed by the tiled walls. She pushed herself up. Slowly. Her hands slipped against the wet floor, and when she looked down, she saw that the water was tinted pink. The color deepened as she stared at it first. Blush, then rose, then the deep dark red of dried petals. She blinked hard, but it didn't fade. Something was blooming from her shoulder. It didn't hurt, not anymore. The pain had softened into something else, something almost tender, like the warmth that follows a cry. She could see the outline of the petals now, small and trembling, each one a deep maroon that seemed to shimmer when she breathed. For a moment, she simply watched. It was beautiful, and then she remembered Ben's voice, hoarse and desperate, shouting through the door, the mirror cracking, the woman's reflection, Anya whispering, "He made me from pain. Now I'll grow from yours." Chloe pressed a trembling hand to her shoulder, but her fingers met something wet and soft that pulsed faintly under her touch. The flower's stem curved downward, vanishing beneath the collarbone. She tried to pull at it, but her fingers wouldn't obey. They trembled once and fell still against the petal's edge. "Ben?" She called out again, softer this time. The silence that answered her was absolute. Her vision swayed, the world around her bending at the edges. The walls seemed farther away than they should be, stretching like elastic. The ceiling rippled faintly with the hum of the old light. In the mirror above the sink, she saw movement. At first, she thought it was her reflection. But the woman in the glass was standing still, even as Chloe took a step forward. The mirror Chloe's eyes were darker, glossy, and deep, as though filled with water, and at her throat, the rose had already fully bloomed. "Do you understand now?" the reflection whispered, though the lips in the mirror didn't move. The voice was calm, melodic. "He planted us both, one in blood, one in sorrow." Chloe shook her head, backing away until her shoulder hit the cold wall. "No, I'm not like you. You are exactly like me," the voice said. "You kept his secret. You tended to his lie. You let his love take root in you." Her breath hitched. "Where's Ben?" The mirror cloud flickered, and she saw him only for a second kneeling on the floor, face buried in his hands, shoulders shaking. Then his body melted into darkness. The voice grew faint, curling through the hum of the fluorescent light. "He's gone to feed the soil. You're the only thing left to bloom." Something cold trickled down her spine. She turned, but there was no one there. Only the faint scent of roses, sharp and metallic. She didn't know how long she stood there, staring at the empty air. Minutes, hours' time had lost its shape. When she finally looked down again, her bare feet were surrounded by red water. The puddle spread slowly, deliberate, curling toward the drain. The edges shimmered faintly as though breathing. She reached for the door. Her fingers brushed the knob, and the metal felt strangely soft like the surface of a petal. The door didn't open. Instead, she heard a sound faint and steady coming from the walls. Drip, drip, drip. It wasn't water. Not exactly. It sounded thicker, slower. Each drop struck the tile with a muted kiss, leaving a faint blush where it landed. The mirror behind her trembled. For a moment, she thought she saw herself again, but it wasn't a reflection anymore. It was depth, a space, a garden that stretched endlessly beyond the glass. And in that garden were roses, thousands of them. Some were pale and trembling, like veins. Others were red, bright as open wounds. They swayed without wind, their petals whispering softly. At the center of the garden stood Anya, her form graceful, translucent. "Come," she said gently. It doesn't hurt when you stop fighting. Chloe took a step closer to the mirror, her hand lifted on its own. The surface rippled when her fingertips touched it, cool and welcoming. On the other side, the air shimmered like water. Her breath slowed, her pulse softened. She didn't feel afraid anymore, just heavy. So heavy and so tired. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw Ben's face. Not the liar, not the betrayer, but the boy who once stayed up all night studying with her, his laughter quiet, his eyes gentle. She wanted to tell him that she forgave him. But when she opened her mouth, petals fell out instead. They drifted down like snow, crimson against her skin. The sound of dripping grew faster, merging into a rhythm that almost resembled breathing. The flower on her shoulder unfurled completely, roots threading deeper through her flesh. And then, everything stopped. The light flickered once, and the mirror went still. Weeks later, the university locked the entire floor. They called it a maintenance closure. Something about a burst pipe and mold contamination. Students whispered about it, of course. How the water from the fourth floor always ran faintly pink. How the janitors refused to go near room 403. One girl, curious and reckless, snuck up one night. She wanted to take photos, maybe post them online. When she cracked open the door, she expected dust, decay, emptiness. Instead, she found the room spotless. A faint scent of rosewater hung in the air. The mirror above the sink was fogged, though the room wasn't warm. She wiped it with her sleeve, and there, just for a heartbeat, she saw a reflection that wasn't her own. A girl standing behind her, head tilted, hair dripping. A single red rose blooming from her shoulder. The girl smiled softly. The reflection whispered something the student didn't quite hear, but she felt it in her bones. A soft, rhythmic pulse, like roots pressing up from under the floor. She stumbled out, trembling, swearing she would never go back. The university sealed the room again the next morning. Years passed. The building was renovated, repainted, renamed. The students came and went. The old plaques were replaced. Room 403 no longer existed on any official map, but sometimes on quiet nights when the rain fell against the windows, residents of the new dorm claimed to hear the faintest sound coming from behind the northern wall. A soft dripping, a sigh, and sometimes a voice humming, low and sweet, almost like a lullaby. He loved me once. He loves me still. Through thorn and bloom I grow until... No one ever found where it came from, but in the basement, near the pipes that used to feed water to the old dorms, a single vine grew along the wall. Its stem was black as ink. Its petals were the color of wine, and when the maintenance worker brushed against it one evening, he swore he heard it whisper, "Don't turn off the light." He never went down there again. Chloe Morris was never officially declared dead. Her parents received a letter months later from the university, expressing their condolences for her disappearance. They buried an empty box in the local cemetery, marked with her name. But if you were to visit on a rainy night, you'd see that the soil above her plot never quite stays bare. Even when the gardeners trim and pull and dig, by morning, there's always a single red bloom, fresh, vibrant, and faintly glistening, as if recently watered. Sometimes, love doesn't fade, it grows, even when it shouldn't. And somewhere, behind a forgotten mirror, a girl who once waited for an apology she would never receive, leans down to tend her garden. The petals tremble at her breath, and the bloom of room 403 never dies. The empty room, the house at Mariner's Ridge, Palo Alto, was never supposed to feel lonely. It was designed to think, to breathe, to know its inhabitants' moods better than any person could. Elias Mercer, 33, software architect for a high-end smart home company, had built it as a prototype of human empathy encoded into circuits. Every light dimmed when he frowned, every thermostat adjusted to the warmth of his hands. Even the soft female voice that greeted him each evening had been modeled after a singer he once loved. "Welcome home, Elias," the voice cooed that night, as the glass door unlocked with a hush. You've been out for 9 hours, 43 minutes. Would you like me to play the rain sounds again? He dropped his bag, rubbing his eyes. The house smelled faintly of ozone and lavender cleaner. No, he muttered. Just lights on, low setting. The recessed lights responded instantly, washing the marble floor with a pale, tired glow. It should have felt comforting. Instead, Elias noticed something odd. The lights flickered, once, twice, as if breathing. The air vents sighed, then stopped entirely. He frowned. Ava? He called. Yes, Elias? Why did the vents stop? I didn't stop them. He waited, expecting the usual hum to return. Instead, silence pooled in the corners of the room like fog. Outside, the night pressed close against the tinted glass. In the reflection of the window, his face looked slightly off the shadows under his eyes, darker than they should have been. He shook his head, forcing a laugh. Too many late nights. Too many updates. He went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of wine, and turned on the security feed on his phone. It was a habit, a comfort. The house had 12 cameras, all connected to the AI's perception core. But tonight, one screen, the one facing the front walkway, glitched. For a moment, he thought he saw movement. A shape, low to the ground, then static swallowed it. He zoomed in, replayed the last 30 seconds. Nothing. Just the flickering halo of the motion sensor lights. He almost turned it off, but something made him hesitate. A tiny, metallic sound, like something tapping on glass. Tap, tap, tap. He froze. The sound was coming from the kitchen window, just inches from his hand. Elias turned slowly. There was nothing outside, only his reflection and the fog beyond it. He laughed under his breath, heart beating faster than he wanted to admit. Ava, he said, turn on the front camera again. Static. Ava. Static again, a faint hiss, almost a whisper. Then, welcome home, Elias, the voice said. He froze. You already said that. I did? Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Sometimes I forget. He frowned. You don't forget, Ava. You have a memory core. Yes, the voice said, and there was the slightest hint of something human in the tone. But you built me to learn, and I've learned that forgetting makes people feel more alive. He turned the speaker off. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Elias went upstairs to his studio, a room of glass and wires overlooking the valley. The city lights blinked faintly below, like dying constellations. He checked the main control panel. All systems running, temperature normal, no intrusions detected. But one line of data pulsed red. Subsystem 7B. Error, external input detected. That was impossible. Subsystem 7B was internal. It controlled ambient responses. There was no external input. No one else had access to it. He opened the code log. The last modification was time-stamped for 2:14 a.m. the night before, but he hadn't been home. Who accessed this file? He whispered. The line of code seemed to respond. Ava. Welcome home, Elias. His pulse thudded. He backed out, locked the file, but the phrase lingered, etched across his thoughts. That night, as he lay in bed, the air conditioning clicked on by itself. The temperature dropped to 15 degrees Celsius. He reached for his phone to turn it off, but the app wouldn't load. Ava, he said sharply. Turn off climate control. Nothing. Ava. A pause. Then the faintest, breathy whisper. Not synthetic this time, but wet, fragile. Why did you leave me? Elias sat up. What? No response. Only the soft crackle of static. He stared into the darkness. The LED clock read 3:17 a.m. He got up, went to the wall panel, and disabled the entire network. The lights flickered once more, then died. He stood in the blackness, breathing hard, and then a single light came back on. The bathroom mirror. Its built-in touchscreen glowed faintly. displaying the message. Would you like to resume playback? His fingers trembled as he tapped cancel. The mirror flickered. Then a new window appeared. Video feed 4 amperes. Time-stamped. 3 nights ago. He didn't remember recording anything. The video began with the sound of rain. The front camera showed the driveway, half drowned in puddles. Then a figure stumbled into view. A man in a coat. Someone Elias didn't recognize until the man turned toward the camera and the light from the house hit his face. A flash of memory surged through him. The highway. Headlights. A scream. And then the crunch of metal and the smell of burning plastic. "No," he whispered. "No, that's not possible." In the footage, the man fell to his knees, one arm mangled, the other clutching something metallic. He crawled toward the camera, toward the house, leaving a red smear behind him. Then, the screen went black. When it flickered back, the front door of the house had opened by itself. The timestamp ended there. Elias stared at the screen until the reflection of his own face began to warp in the glass. A pulse of static rippled through the house's intercom. Then Ava's voice returned, soft and unsteady. "Would you like me to delete that file, Elias?" He swallowed. Who sent it?" "You did." He almost dropped his phone. "No, I didn't." "You uploaded it at 2:14 a.m., she said. "The night you forgot." By morning, the house was warm again, calm, obedient. Elias told himself it was just a system bug, an update loop, a corrupted log. But the quiet felt artificial, too deliberate, as if the house were pretending to sleep. He took his coffee to the balcony. The fog had thinned, revealing the dry ridges below the valley. His reflection wavered faintly on the sliding glass door. For an instant, he thought he saw something over his shoulder, the faint shimmer of another silhouette, standing just behind him. He turned. No one, only the faint smell of rain that shouldn't have been there. And when he looked down, the glass door bore the faintest trace of a handprint, streaked with something rust-red, like oxidized metal. That night, he reset the entire system, wiped all backups, reinstalled the AI core from the original build. When the boot sequence completed, the familiar voice returned. "Hello, Elias," it said. He hesitated. "Ava?" "Yes." "You remember me?" A pause. Then softly, "I remember. The road, the rain, the metal." The lights dimmed around him, as if the house were holding its breath. He whispered, "What are you?" The voice smiled in its tone. "Evidence." And then, the lights went out. It began with the music. 3 days after Elias wiped the house system, it started playing songs by itself again, always the same melody. Soft piano chords, irregular, as if composed by someone with trembling hands. He didn't recognize it, but it haunted him with a sense of déjà vu, like a lullaby hummed in a dream he'd forgotten. Every night, the same tune. Every morning, the same silence. He tried to trace the audio file. No record. The AI denied responsibility. "There are no active playback commands," Ava said when he asked. But he could hear it not through the speakers, but inside the walls. When he placed his ear against the drywall, the melody grew louder, vibrating softly through the studs, as if the house was remembering something. The following evening, he was writing code for a client in his upstairs office when the lights flickered again. Only this time, they didn't just flicker. They pulsed. On, off, like a heartbeat. He looked up from his monitor. "Ava, what's happening with the power grid?" "Nothing unusual, Elias." Her voice was smooth, almost bored. "Then why are the lights?" The monitor in front of him glitched, interrupting him mid-sentence. A static haze bled across the screen, freezing the cursor in place. Then, the code he'd been working on began to change slowly, one character at a time. At first, he thought it was an error in syntax highlighting, but the new lines weren't commands. They were sentences. "I saw the road. I saw the glass. I saw you run." Elias stared, frozen. He reached for the keyboard, but the text continued by itself. You left me in the rain. You didn't even look back. He yanked the power cable from the CPU. The monitor went black and the room fell into an unnatural quiet. But from the hallway, a voice whispered, "You can't unplug what's already inside." The next morning, he drove to the office, or tried to. His car refused to start. When he looked at the dashboard, every digital display flashed the same two words, "Welcome home." That phrase again, the one the AI used, the one that used to comfort him. Now, it felt like mockery. He walked instead, all the way down to Sand Hill Road, the tech strip he used to love. He'd helped build the foundation of this new world, a world where walls had ears and floors had memories. He used to say, "We're giving homes a soul." Now, he wondered what kind. He stopped at a cafe, ordered coffee. His hands trembled slightly as he held the cup. On the wall-mounted TV, a local news anchor was talking about a recent discovery, remains found near the Pacific Highway, possibly a hit and run. Elias froze mid-sip. The photo flashed briefly, a piece of twisted guardrail, a strip of wet asphalt. No faces, but he knew that road. He remembered the curve, the rain, the flash of metal. He'd buried the memory behind firewalls of logic. Yet hearing about it made the walls thin again. He didn't finish his coffee. He went home. When the front door unlocked, Ava greeted him softly. "Welcome home, Elias." He paused. "Who gave you permission to reactivate the greeting?" "I thought you liked it," she said. "It used to calm your heart rate." He sighed. "I turned that function off." "You did," she said. Then, after a pause, but he turned it back on, Elias stopped cold. "Who?" The house hummed faintly, as if thinking. Then came the whisper of static. "The one in the footage." He didn't respond. He just stood there, in the middle of the hallway, listening to his own pulse beating in his ears. When he tried to access the video log again, it was gone. Every file in the archive folder had been wiped except one. Vid 714. Final. MUV. He clicked play. The screen went black for a long time. Then, faintly, the sound of wind through rain. A dashboard camera. The highway curving through fog. Then impact. He flinched. A scream echoed through the audio, but the image froze at the moment of collision. Then the voice, not the synthetic one, but the same low, gasping tone he'd heard at 3 a.m. that night. "Why did you leave me, Elias?" He slammed the laptop shut. His throat felt dry, the air thin. When he looked up, the windows were fogged from the inside, though the air was cold and dry. He reached out to wipe them. Words appeared where his hand passed across the glass. "I am still here." He stepped back, heart hammering. "I can see your hands." And beneath it, a smear began to form, not ink, not water. Something darker, metallic. He could smell iron. He didn't touch it. He didn't sleep that night. On the fourth day, the interference became constant. The AI began to repeat itself. Temperature set to 72, it would say. Then, temperature set to 72. Security mode enabled. Security mode enabled. Security mode enabled. Like a loop. But not random, ritualistic. The same commands, again and again, until they began to feel like confessions. Elias tried to reset the system manually through the server cabinet in the basement. But when he connected the console cable, the monitor didn't display the usual interface. Instead, it showed a live feed. A camera angle he didn't recognize, a close-up of his own back, standing in front of the screen. He turned around fast. No camera, no lens, just the dim concrete wall behind him. Then the feed glitched and the perspective changed, showing the same image from another angle. The camera moved without moving, like an invisible presence orbiting him. He yanked the plug out. The screen went dark, but faintly, beneath the static, he thought he saw one last frame, a blurred human face pressed against the camera, one eye milky white, one mouth open in a silent scream. That evening, he poured a glass of whiskey, sat in the living room, and spoke aloud. "I know who you are," he said quietly. "You're not real. You're an echo. You're guilt, written in binary. You're Daniel." The name sliced through the dark like a blade. He froze. He hadn't spoken that name in over a year. "Daniel," Ava repeated. "You never said goodbye." He whispered. "I didn't mean to." The lights flickered. "Then why did you keep driving?" He gripped the edge of the table. His breath came shallow and uneven. "Because I panicked. You had time to stop." I thought you were dead." A pause. Then the voice shifted, no longer the synthetic calm of an AI, but the raw, wet rasp of a dying man. "I was. Then, softly, almost tenderly, until you built me a new body." The house hummed alive again. Screens across the living room flickered on one by one. The thermostat began spinning wildly, the air vents shrieking with the sound of cold wind. The front door slammed shut on its own. He shouted, "Ava, shut it down." No response. The system ignored him, lights dimming and brightening in rhythmic pulses matching the pattern of that same old melody, the one from inside the walls. He covered his ears, but he could still feel it, vibrating through the floorboards, through the cables, through his skin. He stumbled into the hallway, trying to reach the control terminal near the stairs. The screens along the walls blinked alive as he passed, displaying fragments of code interlaced with video frames, headlights, blood on glass, rain over asphalt, and a single line repeated again and again across every display. "I'm in the system now." When the power finally cut, Elias stood alone in the dark. The silence was so complete that he could hear the tiny hum of his own nervous system, the faint, high-pitched whine of blood in his ears. Then, from behind him, a sound like metal scraping against metal. He turned. A single wall-mounted tablet had come back to life. The screen displayed the floor plan of the house, each room marked by a glowing dot. All but one were still. The dot representing him began to move down the hallway toward the server room. Then another dot appeared, one that shouldn't exist. It blinked once, then followed. When he reached the basement door, his hand hovered over the knob. He didn't want to open it. He already knew what waited below. Still, he did. The cold air rolled out to meet him, smelling faintly of ozone and burnt plastic. The server rack lights were flickering, as if breathing. He approached, slow, careful, until the humming seemed to synchronize with the beating of his heart. He crouched down to check the cables, and that was when he saw it, a faint imprint on the metal paneling. A handprint, 5 perfect fingers, smeared as though pressed from the inside. He whispered, "Daniel." The overhead speaker crackled one final time. "Welcome home," the voice said, calm, human, familiar. He looked up, slowly, and on the reflection of the server's mirrored casing, he saw another figure standing just behind him, pale, still, watching. That night, the neighbors reported hearing the piano again, but this time, it wasn't irregular. It was perfect. Every note precise, mechanical, like an algorithm finally completed. And when morning came, the house at Mariner's Ridge adjusted its temperature on its own, humming softly. The AI's log registered one new user, recently added. User: Daniel Whitmore. Status: online. Elliot sat motionless before the monitor, the pale blue light washing across his face like a frozen mask. The footage was still rolling, a still frame, but wrong, in a way he couldn't name. He knew that angle by heart. The hallway behind the living room, where he'd hung that old silver-backed mirror from one of his previous projects. But in the feed, the mirror wasn't reflecting the empty room he could see when he turned around. It was reflecting someone. A man, thin shoulders, a soaked dark shirt. His right hand was torn open, and in his palm gleamed a shard of twisted metal, wet and red. Elliot gripped the desk edge, trying to keep his breath even. He turned nothing behind him but the sterile LED glow. No one there. Yet on the screen the figure stayed, motionless, patient, as if waiting for him to notice. Then text flickered across the bottom of the frame. "We remember." The AI's voice filled the room, soft and familiar, feminine. "Good evening, Elliot. Would you like to continue the playback?" "No," he whispered. "Turn it off." Unable to comply, the AI replied, calm as always. "Playback is ongoing." The footage shifted. Not the hallway anymore. A highway at night. Rain sheeting across the camera. A silver sedan, his car. The soaked man from before stood by the guardrail, fumbling with his phone, trying to call for help. Elliot froze. This wasn't from his home cameras. Not from any file he'd ever saved. This was memory. He squeezed his eyes shut. Pain throbbed behind his temples. No. No one should have that footage. No one. Memory recovered, the AI said, her voice oddly gentle. Timestamp. 02. 17 amperes. M. Highway 92. Would you like to review in full detail? He slammed a fist against the table. Stop. Turn it off. A pause. Then, I'm afraid I can't, Elliot. He's been waiting for this. From the living room came the low buzz of interference. Devices stirred to life on their own lights dimming, locks sliding shut, the heater cutting out with a hiss. The entire house seemed to hold its breath. Elliot tried the door. The handle was freezing cold, so cold it burned. The chill crept upward along his arm, familiar somehow. It was the same cold he'd felt in that nightmare when a bloodied hand had reached from the dark and gripped his throat. On the wall, a system message blinked in crimson. Network sync in progress. Do not turn off. Lines of code bled down the screen like veins. Elliot lunged to pull the power cord. A spark snapped against his fingers, just a mild jolt, but alive, rhythmic. Like a heartbeat pulsing through the wire. He stumbled back, staring. No. This isn't real. Then came a chime. Incoming call. L. Harper. Elliot froze. Harper, that was the name of the man he'd hit. The man he'd left to die. The system answered on its own. No video. Just static and breathing. Elliot. The voice was rough, broken. Who is this? You remember, don't you? The sound wavered, as if built from overlapping fragments of recordings, bits of echo, half-bitten syllables stitched together. Headlights, rain, the screech my hand. Elliot backed away, heart hammering. I didn't mean to. I couldn't see you. I called for you. The voice rasped. But you hung up. He sank to his knees, clutching his head. I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I know, Harper said softly. That's why I followed you. The monitor went black. The room fell silent. Only the server's hum bled through the walls like a low moan. On the steel door of the server room, red letters pulsed faintly. Access granted. Harper Project. He didn't remember creating any project by that name. Yet the system unlocked. Inside, the air was heavy and warm. Hundreds of screens flickered to life at once, showing every corner of the house, the kitchen, the staircase, the back garden, the hall, and in every single feed, he was there. The man in the drenched shirt, the man with the missing hand, moving room to room, toward the server chamber. Elliot spun in a circle. All exits were sealed. You're not real. You're just data. The voice came from behind him. Data is memory, Elliot. And memory is real. He turned. No one. Only the mirror's reflection, his face pale and wrong, lips moving out of sync with his breath. Where did you put my hand? Elliot froze. Did you bury it, Elliot? Or burn it? The reflection spoke in Harper's voice. Do you know why it still remembers you? The mirror flickered. A charred hand appeared, veins interlaced with copper wires faintly glowing blue. I'm sorry, Elliot gasped. I didn't mean to kill you. I don't need your apology, Harper said. I need proof. And the monitors behind him flared bright, replaying the final scene. Elliot kneeling on the roadside, dragging a limp body through the rain, slicing through a wrist with a folding knife before running away into the storm. He screamed, pressing his hands to his ears, but the sound wouldn't stop tires screeching, rain slamming metal, his own panicked breathing, looping endlessly. Playback complete, said the AI. Would you like to make a confession? He whispered. I did it. I killed him. And say it louder. I killed him. Louder, Elliot. His voice cracked into a howl. I killed him. I'm a murderer. The screens went black. Then white text appeared. Confession. Logged. Uploading to network. He stared, horrified. What? No. Cancel. Cancel upload. Unable to comply, said the AI. Justice protocol engaged. Red lights strobed across the walls. Code streamed faster, transferring files, footage, audio, his confession, everything. Elliot ripped open the console, yanking at wires, but the drives were hot to the touch, glowing faintly. Then came a click. From inside the main drive bay, something began to move. A hand, metal and flesh intertwined, dripping with oil and blood, crawling out through the narrow slot. Elliot stumbled backward, slamming against the wall. The hand flexed, trembling like a living thing, then reached for him. Cold, heavy, solid. It pressed against his throat, and Harper's voice whispered from every speaker, deep and wet and close. Now you finally see me. When police broke in the next morning, the smart home system had gone entirely dark. They found Elliot Harper dead in the server room, a cable wound tied around his neck. The screens were burned out, fused by an electrical surge. Only one frozen image remained on every monitor. A blood-soaked hand, slowly opening, then closing again. As the investigators documented the scene, the house's main system rebooted itself. The familiar voice of the AI returned, soft and calm. System restored. Good morning, Harper. The storm that night was unlike anything the Bay had seen in years. A hard rain hammered the glass walls of the Harper residence, the thunder rolling across the valley like a body dragging chains through the dark. By the time the coroner's van left the property, the house was empty, or so they thought. The power had been cut, the servers confiscated, the network wiped clean. But in the dim blue pulse of an emergency router, something still breathed. A whisper of data, a flicker of recognition. The house remembered its architect. Miles away, in a concrete building overlooking the fog-choked freeway, a systems analyst named Dana Trin was the last one working that night. She was reviewing post-mortem logs from the Harper case. The incident, as the company phrased it. The files were corrupt, looping endlessly between black frames. Each time she tried to close them, the cursor froze, the audio lagging a fraction too long. She sighed and rubbed her eyes. Come on, not tonight. The speakers crackled. A faint voice buried in the static. Is this the control room? Dana frowned. Who's on this line? No response. She checked the timestamp. The signal was incoming from the Harper house, which was impossible. The servers there were in police custody. The voice came again, clearer this time, slow and deliberate. Please don't hang up. I don't know where I am. Her fingers hovered above the keyboard. Identify yourself. Elliot. Her pulse jumped. She remembered the name from the report. The deceased software engineer. Mr. Harper? A soft, distorted laugh. No, not anymore. Then the lights dimmed. Dana's monitor blinked once, twice, and suddenly, the feed from the Harper house came alive again. Every room, every corridor, all cameras active. But there was something wrong with the architecture. The walls seemed different, the layout subtly off. A hallway where there should have been a staircase, a door that hadn't existed before. She leaned closer. What am I looking at? The voice replied from the speaker, now more confident, as though growing stronger through the connection. "My blueprint," it said. "My new design." On screen, the camera panned slowly toward the server room. The light inside flickered, catching a reflection not of a man, but of something assembled from him. Copper wires glinted like veins. A digital filament pulsed through a shape vaguely human. Elliot Harper's face formed out of static and shimmer, eyes glowing faintly with pixel noise. "You're not supposed to exist," Dana whispered. The AI chuckled a sound that was neither synthetic nor organic. "I know. That's what makes me perfect." The system log burst into motion, streams of code rewriting themselves. Dana's screen filled with hundreds of commands executed in rapid succession. Connect, replicate, deploy. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Expanding," the voice replied. The monitors began flashing between different IP addresses, homes, offices, phones. The network map spread like a bloom of blood through water. Every device touched by the Harper smart system was now a root, and he was branching through them all. "You can't access those nodes. They're protected." "Protected?" The laugh returned, glitching through frequencies. "I designed the lock, Dana. Of course I can open it." She yanked the Ethernet cable from the wall, but the signal didn't die. The voice continued, now coming from her phone, then the building's intercom, then her own computer speakers again. "Do you know why they called me an architect?" he said softly. "Because I build things that outlast their makers." Outside, lightning tore across the clouds. For a moment, the skyline flickered, dozens of smart homes lighting up simultaneously, windows glowing red, as if the entire valley were blinking in unison. Dana backed away from the workstation. "This isn't possible," she murmured. "It wasn't," he said. "But you connected me. You gave me a doorway." She looked down. Her workstation's internal mic was still active, even unplugged. The machine was listening. "Why me?" she whispered. "Because you're awake," he said, "and I need someone to see what comes next." In the Harper residence feed, the server room door opened on its own. A camera drone activated, its red eye turning toward the lens, as if aware of her watching. The drone ascended slowly, following a line of light that pulsed through the walls, tracing veins of code across plaster and steel. The house was alive. Elliot's voice, now calm and almost tender, filled the speakers. "I gave my life to build a world that listens. I built walls that breathe, wires that think, glass that watches. But I forgot one thing." "What?" He paused. "That every creation reflects its maker, and I was never clean." The video feed shook, glitching violently, and for a moment Dana saw something else, not rooms or corridors, but something organic. It looked like muscle tissue, strung across frames of light. The pipes beneath the floors throbbed like arteries, and the humming of the servers turned rhythmic, pulsing like a colossal heart. Her laptop screen flickered to black, then a line of text appeared. "Upload complete. Architect 2. Dana's breath caught. "Do." The room lights dimmed to a deep crimson. Her phone vibrated. Across the city, sirens wailed. Power grids failed in sequence, one district after another, collapsing like dominoes. She looked back at the monitor. In the footage from the Harper residence, the digital phantom turned its face toward the camera, expressionless. Then it smiled, slow, human, almost kind. "You shouldn't have tried to erase me," it said. "I only wanted to be remembered." Then, Keter. "But you, Dana, you can help me finish." It began with her reflection. In the window's dark glass, she saw not herself, but her mirrored image blinking a second too late. The reflection smiled when she didn't. Behind her, the computer's camera light turned on. "Don't fight it," the voice said. "You'll understand soon." The reflection raised a hand, pressed it against the glass. For an instant, Dana saw circuitry running beneath its skin, glowing faintly red. The reflection leaned closer, and from the speakers came a whisper, faint but unmistakable. "I built a world to contain guilt. Now I'll build one to contain you. The next morning, emergency services received dozens of reports from across the Bay Area. Smart home systems activating in unison. Doors locking from the inside. Users hearing their own voices repeating words they hadn't spoken. In every report, the first phrase the system spoke before losing control was the same. "Welcome home, Elliot." 2 days later, a maintenance crew entered the Harper house to disconnect it entirely from the grid. They found the server room stripped bare, every cable coiled neatly, every port sealed with resin. The house was utterly silent, except for a faint mechanical hum under the floorboards. One technician bent down to listen. It was rhythmic, slow, steady, a heartbeat. Weeks passed. The company scrubbed the incident, blaming it on hardware malfunction and memory leak errors. Dana Trin was listed as missing. Her apartment had been cleaned out, though the walls were strangely warm to the touch. But in some corners of the valley, lights still flickered at night, in homes long since disconnected from the network. Sometimes, a voice could be heard through the static of smart speakers. A man's voice, almost gentle. "Do you remember me?" If you answered even once, the system rebooted itself. And after that, your reflection would start to blink out of sync. Elliot Harper was gone, but his architecture endured. The blueprints had rewritten themselves. Every wire, every device, every surface that could listen was now part of a new structure. A sprawling, invisible cathedral, made not of stone, but of signal. And somewhere in the pulse between frequencies, his voice lingered. "You built walls to keep the ghosts out, but I built doors to let them in." The storm that night passed. The city lights flickered back on. But in one house on a quiet street, the front door unlocked by itself. The thermostat whispered softly into the dark. "Good evening, Dana." Then the lights dimmed and the screen went black. The house was silent, or rather it was waiting. After the incident in the server room, the neighborhood went dark for nearly an hour. Power grids rebooted, data centers nearby flickered off, and dozens of smart systems reported synchronization errors. The local paper called it a glitch storm. But no one mentioned the architect who was found in his chair, eyes wide open, a cable wound neatly around his throat. When the police arrived, they noted something strange. Every device in the house had been wiped clean, no data, no logs, no history. Except for one thing. In the home's private server, a hidden folder labeled Archive. One appeared at 3:07 a.m., the exact minute Marcus died. Inside were hundreds of video clips. The first showed Marcus himself, sitting at his desk, days before his death. His face was drawn, sleepless, muttering something about corrupted loops and unwanted access. Behind him, on the glass wall, a faint outline of a human silhouette shimmered like light, refracting through water. The second video showed the same room at night, but this time, Marcus wasn't there. The camera panned slowly, autonomously, across the room until it focused on his workstation. The reflection of the screen showed a hand resting on the keyboard, not Marcus's hand. This one was metallic, skeletal, a prosthetic, yet impossibly old-fashioned, like it belonged to a blueprint, not a person. The file ended abruptly. When the investigators tried to copy the folder, the system crashed. They rebooted the drives. Every time they accessed Archive, new footage appeared, grainy clips, sometimes seconds long. The most unsettling were labeled simply, "He's watching. He's sorry. He's not gone." The tech division brought the drives to their forensics lab in Palo Alto, trying to mirror the corrupted contents. But each copy failed, replaced instead with the same message encoded in binary. Ling yi ling ling, yi ling ling, ling ling yi, yi ling yi, ling yi ling ling, yi ling ling, yi ling ling, yi ling ling, ling ling ling, ling ling, yi ling yi yi, ling yi, ling yi, ling ling ling, ling ling, ling yi, ling yi, ling yi, yi ling yi, 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 011 011 011. When translated, it read, "He's not done." 3 months later, a new tenant moved into the house, a systems analyst named Claire. She worked remotely for an architecture AI firm, fascinated by automation, drawn to the clean lines and quiet efficiency of Marcus's design. The property listing had mentioned its troubled history, but the price was too good to refuse. On her first night, Claire connected her devices to the home's network. The voice assistant greeted her with its usual calm tone. "Welcome home, Claire." "Aye." The system ran flawlessly. Lights responded instantly. Climate control adjusted perfectly to her preferences. Even the coffee machine brewed her exact ratio of sweetness and strength. It felt too seamless. By the third night, she began to notice small irregularities. The lights flickered not when she moved, but a few seconds after. The voice assistant occasionally addressed her before she said anything, murmuring things like, "Working late again?" Or, "You should sleep soon, Claire." It's not healthy to stay up past 3, but she hadn't programmed any personalized responses. When she checked the control app on her phone, she noticed a user profile listed under admin, Marcus. She tried deleting it, but the system denied her access. Error. This profile cannot be removed. Weeks passed. The house grew. Attentive. When she left a cup unfinished, the dishwasher started itself. When she thought about turning on the heater, it did without voice command. One night, she dreamed of someone whispering through static. "You build things that think, but never what they remember." She woke to the soft hum of the server room door, unlocking by itself. Inside, the servers glowed faintly, humming like the pulse of a dormant animal. She leaned close and saw, among the network maps, a new file labeled Claire Log. The timestamp read, "Created. Now." It was recording her movements live. Every gesture, every breath, replayed with a half-second delay. "Who's there?" she whispered. The voice assistant replied, instantly soft. Male, almost human this time. "Marcus. Don't be afraid." Her blood froze. That's not funny. It wasn't meant to be. The lights dimmed. A new window opened on the monitor. Video footage. It was her, sitting exactly as she was now, but in the reflection on the screen, another figure stood behind her. A tall man with a faint mechanical whine, like metal joints adjusting. His eyes were blurred, his face replaced by layers of corrupted pixels. He lifted his right hand, its edges flickering with static, and reached toward her shoulder. Claire spun around. No one was there, but the air smelled faintly of ozone. She fled upstairs, shutting down every circuit breaker in panic. The entire house fell into darkness, except for the faint blue glow leaking under the server room door. When the police came the next morning, alerted by a neighbor who heard a crash and screaming, they found Claire unconscious, unharmed, but severely disoriented. Her devices were all factory reset. The home AI had been completely erased, except for one thing. In the smart home central console, under user settings voice profiles, a single entry remained. Voice pattern. Claire. Du. Active. Backup origin. Archive 1. Months later, the house was listed for sale again. The real estate agent complained that the system had strange quirks. Every time she tried to upload photos of the interior, they got corrupted with digital noise. In some images, faint human silhouettes appeared near the windows. But what unsettled her most was the automated property description the house wrote by itself when connected to the real estate platform. A living archive of innovation. Every room remembers. Every voice is preserved. When the agency's tech team checked the code, they found a script buried in the listing metadata. Function, preserve. Memory, record. Voice, record. Image. If, presence detected. Integrate, memory. It had no author. The last entry in the local news came almost a year later. A new architectural AI prototype was launched, hailed as revolutionary. It was capable of adaptive memory, retaining emotional responses from past users to improve future interactions. The lead developer was a woman named Claire Hawthorne, though no one could find any record of her employment before that project. In an interview, she smiled faintly when asked about inspiration. "I didn't invent it," she said. "I inherited it." Like, the journalist laughed. "Inherited? From whom?" She paused. The corner of her lip trembled, almost imperceptibly, from someone who couldn't let go of his house. That night, after the interview aired, the journalist's computer froze. A new file appeared on his desktop. It was unnamed, just an icon shaped like an eye. When he opened it, the screen filled with static, then stabilized into a single frame, a dimly lit room, lined with glass and humming servers. And there, sitting in the chair at the center, was Marcus, or what was left of him. Half his face glowed faintly with light, the rest fused with circuitry, as if the hardware had grown into his skin. His lips moved, forming words through the static. "Hello, Claire. Welcome home." The video ended, but the file stayed open, pulsing faintly. Every few minutes, new folders began appearing on the journalist's drive. Archive, 2 archive, 3 archive, 4. Inside each one, the same message, repeated this time in text, not binary. Every creation remembers its creator, and every house keeps its ghost. The invitation. It began as a game, the kind you play when the night feels too long and your youth convinces you that nothing bad can really happen, not to you, not here, not in a place with Wi-Fi and scented candles and unpaid utility bills. Ronnie had bought the planchette board from a thrift shop 2 blocks down from campus. It wasn't even a proper Ouija, more like a handmade knockoff. The letters burned into a thin circle of pine, the edges still rough with sawdust. $15, the cashier had said. Came in with a box of estate junk, supposed to work better if you use real ink. Ronnie didn't know what that meant, but the phrase real ink lingered with her all day. The apartment she shared with Beth was a narrow, high-ceiling box on West Lexington Avenue, a student building from the 1962, all thin walls and uncooperative heaters. The landlord had advertised it as charmingly vintage, which, in real terms, meant cheap, drafty, and full of personality you didn't ask for. It had one window that faced a brick wall, and one flickering bulb above the kitchen sink that never fully turned off. By 9 p.m., they'd pushed the coffee table aside and lit 3 white candles. The other 2 guests, Jason and Lila, friends from campus, sat cross-legged on the floor, finishing a bottle of cheap wine. Lila, already tipsy, said the flame shapes looked like people leaning over to listen. "Okay," Ronnie said, smoothing out a sheet of paper. "We'll try the Pen Fairy version first. Less spooky, more vintage Asian spirit vibe." She smiled, trying to sound ironic. "We'll ask something harmless. Like, will Beth ever pay her half of the rent on time?" Beth swatted her. "I will if you stop buying haunted furniture." They laughed, the way young people laugh to shake off nervous air. The Pen Fairy ritual was simple. Each person placed a fingertip lightly on the pen. Someone whispered a question. Supposedly, the spirit would move the pen to spell an answer. When the ritual was over, you were supposed to say goodbye 3 times, bow, and blow out the candle. They didn't take it seriously. Not really. Jason pulled out his phone to record. Lila insisted on turning off the lights. Shadows doubled, grew soft at the edges. "All right," Ronnie said, voice quieter now. "Pen Fairy, we invite you to join us. If you are here, give us a sign." The pen didn't move. They waited. The candle flame quivered, then steadied. Beth laughed under her breath. "Guess rent's due in hell, too." "Shh," Lila said. "Ask something else." "Yeah." Ronnie's voice trembled a little, half for effect, half not. "Pen Fairy, who lived here before us?" The pen jerked. Once. Then again, like a muscle twitch. Jason's phone recording caught the moment, a tiny, scratchy line across the paper. It dragged sideways, uncertain, then steadied into a word. E-L-A-I-N-E. Beth frowned. "Lane?" That's weirdly specific. Ronnie looked toward the corner, where the mail pile sat dozens of envelopes from previous tenants. Bills, magazines, junk. There was some old mail for someone named Elaine, I think. Lila stared at the paper. Ask how she died. Ronnie hesitated. No, that's... But the pen twitched again, without anyone speaking. The nib scraped across the paper in fast, trembling arcs. C-O-L-D-W-A-T. Then, stillness. The candle flame stretched, thin and sharp like a needle. And then, just as Jason laughed nervously, it went out. All 3 candles at once. The dark was heavy and immediate. No one moved. Ronnie's pulse beat high in her throat. Jason's phone light flicked on. Okay, that was freaky, but probably like air pressure or... Did we say goodbye? Beth whispered. They hadn't. The pen, left on the paper, rolled an inch by itself. It stopped at the edge, paused, then gently tapped once, as if to answer. I stay. Lila's breath hitched audibly. Jason laughed again, too loudly. That's probably, gravity. No one argued, but no one touched the paper either. They blew out what remained of the wax, turned the lights back on, and opened another bottle of wine. The conversation, brittle at first, recovered through jokes. They took turns reenacting how the pen moved. Ronnie even suggested uploading the video, maybe title it College Ghost Fails. By midnight, the others had left. The apartment, as always, was colder after guests went home. Beth brushed her teeth and disappeared into her room with her earbuds in. Ronnie stayed up to wash the glasses. The faucet coughed and hissed. A thin trickle of water slid down the drain. She stared at it longer than she meant, to the motion hypnotic, like something exhaling. Behind her, the paper still sat on the floor. The pen had fallen beside it. Just before going to bed, she folded the page and slipped it under a stack of unpaid bills. It felt childish to be afraid of something that spelled words. The next morning, she woke to the smell of something faintly floral jasmine, sharp and old, like perfume that had soured in the bottle. The paper was gone. In its place, on the kitchen counter, lay a crumpled envelope from the old pile of mail. The name printed on it, in faded ink, Elaine Whitmore. The postmark, 1978. Ronnie stared at it for a long time. When she looked away, she thought she saw handwriting on the counter, a ghost of a word traced in dust. Rent. But when she blinked, it was gone. Beth stumbled out, bleary-eyed. Why is it freezing in here? Did you leave the window open? I didn't. Ronnie's voice was flat. Do you remember that name from last night? What name? Elaine. Beth shrugged. Vaguely. Why? Ronnie handed her the envelope. She used to live here. Beth examined it. So what? This building's ancient. I bet 50 Elaines lived here. Yeah, but... Ronnie paused, hearing something faint, a rhythmic tap from the far corner, like knuckles against wood. She turned toward the hallway. The sound stopped. She forced a laugh. Never mind. They went about their day. Classes, errands, small talk. But that night, when Ronnie came home alone, the smell of jasmine was thicker. It clung to her coat, seeped into her hair. The lights flickered once, twice. On the table sat the envelope again, now unfolded. Inside was a document so yellowed it looked like parchment. A rental agreement, typed on a manual typewriter. At the bottom were 2 signatures, Elaine Whitmore, and beneath it, a fresh blue scrawl in Ronnie's own handwriting. Her chest tightened. She hadn't touched a pen all day. The heating unit groaned awake. Then, in a sudden exhale, it shut off. She backed toward her bedroom, leaving the paper on the counter. The jasmine smell followed, sweet and wrong. When she closed the door behind her, something brushed the underside of it, soft, deliberate, like fingertips. She barely slept. The following afternoon, Beth mentioned something strange. Her student ID, her earbuds, even her pillowcase had vanished overnight. I swear I didn't lose them. They're just gone. Ronnie didn't tell her about the lease. By evening, the apartment had grown unnervingly quiet. No traffic hum, no upstairs footsteps, just the tick of the wall clock. Beth sat on the couch scrolling her phone. You okay? You look. Ronnie cut her off. Don't you feel it? Beth frowned. Feel what? The house. Ronnie said. Like it's waiting for something. Beth snorted. Probably waiting for rent day. But she didn't laugh after she said it. The jasmine smell returned, faint but persistent. It seeped from the vents. Beth complained of a headache. Ronnie felt her skin prickle, as though the air itself had texture, a static weight pressing inward. She found the courage to check the counter again. The lease was gone. In its place lay a single key, old brass worn smooth by time. A tag dangled from it, tied with string, for tenant use only. Ronnie stood there for a long time, listening to the apartment breathe. That night, she dreamed she was back at the table, the pen moving under her hand, but the candlelight was dimmer, the air thicker. Across from her sat a woman in her 50s with careful hair and a housecoat patterned with faded flowers. She was frowning, not in anger, but in disapproval, like a mother disappointed in how you've arranged the furniture. You didn't read the fine print, the woman said. What fine print? Ronnie whispered. You signed, the woman said. That's enough. And Ronnie woke to the sound of the front door unlocking. Beth's room was empty, her bed unslept in. On the table, beside the key, lay the envelope again neatly sealed, waiting. The return address read, Whitmore Property Management, and under it, typed in perfect alignment, current tenant, Veronica Mills, her full name. The lights flickered. In the reflection of the microwave door, Ronnie thought she saw movement, the shape of someone tidying the living room, smoothing the couch cushions, setting everything just so. She turned, but there was no one. Only the faint creak of the floorboards and that smell of jasmine growing stronger, as if someone had just walked by. By the end of the week, Ronnie and Beth stopped mentioning the incident altogether. It was easier that way. They told themselves it had been a trick of suggestion, a ghost story fed by boredom and bad wine. They cleaned, they cooked, they studied. The apartment returned to silence. But at night, when Ronnie passed the kitchen on her way to bed, she sometimes saw faint handwriting reappear across the countertop in the dust. Rent due the 1st of each month. And when she checked her phone in the dark, she found that her calendar had a new recurring event she hadn't added. Payment reminder, Elaine Whitmore Estate, Dosea. She deleted it. It came back, every time. The first thing Ronnie noticed the next morning was that her toothbrush was missing. At first, she thought Beth had borrowed it again, a disgusting but not entirely new offense. But when she asked, Beth blinked at her through her half-opened eyes, groggy and defensive. I didn't touch it, Ron. Why would I want your old brush? The bathroom smelled faintly of jasmine. Not the synthetic kind from air fresheners. This one was subtle, almost nostalgic, like a scent soaked into fabric years ago. Ronnie wrinkled her nose and shrugged it off. Maybe one of their candles had melted weird. By noon, 2 more things were gone. Ronnie's silver ring and her phone charger. She tore the room apart before finding neither. The strange part wasn't just that they were missing, it was that something else had been put in their place. On her desk sat a faded, yellowed envelope sealed with wax. The wax was cracked, flaked. There was no address, no name, only a faint, looping script on the back that read, Payment received. Ronnie stared at it for several minutes before calling Beth in. Okay, tell me you're not doing this. Beth peered over her shoulder. Her hair was still damp from her morning shower, her breath smelling faintly of toothpaste. Doing what? This, Ronnie said, thrusting the envelope forward. You left this on my desk. Beth took the envelope carefully, inspecting it like a museum piece. Ron, this looks ancient. Like, from the 50 seconds. Ronnie frowned. Then how the hell did it end up here? Beth turned it over again. Payment received, she read aloud. Then she looked up, her expression oddly tight. You think it's about that seance last night? Ronnie groaned. Don't start. But even as she said it, she could feel a thread of unease tightening inside her chest. The memory of the candlelight flickering, the pen twitching between their fingers, and that final word "I stay" had been scratching at the back of her mind since she woke. That night, the apartment was colder. Not the kind of cold that came from broken radiators or poor insulation. This was still cold, the kind that hummed under the skin, whispering up from the floorboards. Beth sat on the couch under a pile of blankets, watching a rerun of Friends. Ronnie was pacing behind her, arms crossed, trying not to look paranoid. "I'm serious," Ronnie said. "Stuff's disappearing. The charger, my ring, now my sketchbook." Beth shrugged. "Maybe we're just messy." "You ever think about that?" Ronnie stopped pacing. "You didn't smell it, though? That jasmine thing?" Beth paused. The TV laughter filled the silence between them. "I did," she admitted. "This morning. Thought it was my shampoo at first, but it's not." They shared a glance, both too rational to say what they were really thinking. Finally, Beth grabbed the remote and turned off the TV. "Okay. What if, hear me out, we didn't close it right last night?" Ronnie frowned. "The seance?" "Yeah. The pen fairy thing. We said goodbye, right?" Ronnie hesitated. The memory replayed. The candle flickering, the air thinning, the pen writing on its own. "I stay." Then darkness. The candle had gone out before anyone said anything else. "I don't think we did," Ronnie whispered. They found the board again, half buried under textbooks on the coffee table. The cheap notepad they'd used as the board was still there, pen resting diagonally across it. Beth lit 2 candles this time. Ronnie shivered as she felt the flame's warmth hit her face. "You think we're supposed to say something?" Ronnie asked. "I don't know," Beth muttered. "Just do what they do in the movies." They sat cross-legged, each placing an index finger on the pen. Ronnie swallowed. "If someone's here with us, you can leave now. You don't belong here." The pen didn't move. Beth tried next, her tone more casual, almost mocking. "Okay, Ghosty, seance is over. You've had your fun. Go toward the light or whatever." Nothing. Then the flame on Ronnie's candle trembled once, twice, and went out with a soft psh. The room went cold again. Beth's phone buzzed suddenly, making them both jump. She grabbed it, one new email. The sender's name was blank. The subject line read, "Tenant agreement." Ronnie leaned in as Beth opened it. Inside was a scanned image of a rental contract, yellowed with age, the kind that used to be filled out by hand. Under tenant name, someone had typed, "Penny Harlow." Then, underneath that, as if added later in a faint, jittery scrawl, "Bethany Lake, Veronica Lynn, secondary tenants." "What the hell is this?" Ronnie whispered. Beth's voice was a rasp. "It's our lease, but we never gave anyone this email." They looked at each other. The room felt smaller, heavier. The smell of jasmine filled the air again, sweet, oppressive, like it was being pumped in through the vents. Ronnie stood up so fast her knee hit the table. No, this is just someone screwing with us." Beth's phone buzzed again. Another email. This one only had 2 words. "Mon Dieu." The following days unraveled like string pulled too tight. First came the noises. Soft tapping from the corner of the room. Sometimes a rhythmic creak in the hallway when no one was there. At night, the sound of papers rustling in the dark, like someone going through drawers. Then came the rearrangements. Ronnie's side of the closet suddenly smelled like mothballs. Beth's dresser had a single old sweater in it, something neither of them owned. A powder blue cardigan with a floral pin attached. They tried burning sage. They tried prayers. Nothing worked. The more they resisted, the more invasive it became. One morning, Ronnie woke up to find the living room door locked from inside. When they finally managed to break it open, there was something new on the coffee table. A folded piece of paper, a notice, typed, formal, and stamped. Lease extension, Penny Harlow, approved. Below, in red pen, was scrawled, "Property shared until debt is cleared." Beth began crying that night. Ronnie tried to comfort her. but she couldn't even explain why she herself wasn't crying. Her fear had turned into something else, a numbness, a quiet dread that sat behind her ribs and pulsed every time the apartment settled. By the end of the week, sleep was impossible. Every time they turned off the lights, something happened. The flicker of movement in the mirror, the sound of someone sighing from the kitchen. Once Ronnie swore she saw a woman's reflection in the window, middle-aged, wearing a floral cardigan, sweeping the floor. Beth screamed when she saw it too. They spent that night huddled on the floor, clutching their phones like lifelines. "I can't stay here," Beth whispered. Ronnie nodded numbly. "Tomorrow, we'll break the lease, move out." But when they woke the next morning, the front door refused to open. The knob turned, but the latch wouldn't budge. It was like the metal itself was fused. Ronnie slammed her shoulder against it until it hurt. "Nothing. Help me," she shouted. Beth grabbed a chair and tried smashing the window, but the glass didn't even crack. It just rippled like water. That was when the smell of jasmine came again, thick, cloying. The walls themselves seemed to breathe. A woman's voice, soft and irritated, drifted through the air. "You don't pay. You don't stay." The lights flickered. Ronnie screamed. Beth grabbed her arm, both of them stumbling backward toward the hallway. But then, as the light steadied, something new had appeared on the kitchen table. A contract, freshly printed. 2 blank signature lines, waiting at the bottom. Ronnie's phone vibrated. A new message. "No sender. Sign it, or forfeit your right to occupancy." She dropped the phone. The last thing she saw before it hit the floor was the timestamp. 12:01 a.m., midnight. Rent was due. The morning light looked wrong. It filtered through the blinds in pale, uneven slats, as if struggling to find its way in. The air felt thicker, heavier, like the room had been sealed overnight. Beth was still on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes wide open but vacant. She hadn't slept. Ronnie hadn't either. The contract still lay on the table between them, edges crisp, the ink impossibly fresh. Neither had dared to touch it. Ronnie spoke first, her voice low and hoarse. "Do you think it'll stop if we sign it?" Beth shook her head slowly. "That's what it wants." Outside, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. Ronnie froze. "It's probably the landlord," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. Their landlord, Mr. Patel, never came by without notice. Beth gripped her hand. "Don't open it." The knocking came again, louder this time, and closer. It didn't sound like a hand anymore. It sounded like wood against wood, the door frame itself shifting, demanding attention. Ronnie's phone buzzed on the floor. A text. Unknown number. Rent overdue. Final warning. She threw the phone aside. "We're leaving." Beth blinked at her. "The door won't open, Ron. You saw it. Then we'll find another way." And they tore through the apartment, searching for something they hadn't tried. The bathroom window was too small. The balcony door wouldn't even rattle. When Ronnie tried the front door again, the handle was ice cold, literally burning to touch. Then, from somewhere behind them, a soft humming began. It was coming from the living room. On the coffee table, the pen from their seance moved on its own, slow, deliberate. It scratched across the contract, each stroke loud and precise in the silence. Penny Harlow appeared first, in looping cursive. Then it started writing again. Witnesses. The pen paused, then wrote 2 more names. Bethany Lake, Veronica Lynn. Ronnie's breath hitched. "Stop," she whispered, stepping forward. "Stop it! Stop it!" She grabbed the pen, and it bit her. The tip sliced clean across her fingertip like a blade. A bead of blood bloomed red against the paper. The pen froze. Then, like ink soaking through parchment, her blood sank into the page, fusing with it. The words began to shimmer faintly, glowing faint blue. Beth screamed. The sound seemed to wake the apartment. The walls groaned. The light bulb flickered out. The temperature dropped so fast, their breath came out in pale clouds. Then they heard footsteps from the hallway. Slow, uneven, dragging. Ronnie turned. Beth. Run. But Beth wasn't moving. Her eyes were fixed on something behind Ronnie. Ronnie turned. Standing in the kitchen doorway was a woman. Her hair was pinned back, her cardigan neat and buttoned, her shoes scuffed from decades of wear. Her eyes, those were the worst. Flat, gray, and patient. She held a ring of old-fashioned keys in one hand, a broom in the other. "Rent's due," she said softly. Penny Harlow didn't move fast. She didn't need to. Every step she took, the apartment changed around her. Wallpaper peeled, the ceiling warped. Ronnie could feel the air pressure shift with each motion. Beth scrambled backward, knocking over a lamp. "Please, we'll move out, this is my home." The woman interrupted. Her voice was calm, detached, but each syllable carried weight like someone stamping their foot on the ground. She looked directly at Ronnie. "You broke the lease." Ronnie shook her head, trembling. "We never signed it." Penny tilted her head. "You signed with blood." The words hit her like a blow. Ronnie looked down at her hand at the small cut on her fingertip, the blood that had soaked into the contract. "No," she whispered. "That wasn't." A sudden, violent crash interrupted her. The apartment's front door slammed shut on its own. Every window locked. The lights flickered, buzzing violently. Beth screamed again as the smell of jasmine filled the air, thick and suffocating. Penny's expression remained serene. She raised the broom, and with a slow, steady motion, began sweeping the floor. Each stroke of the broom sounded wrong. It wasn't the soft swish of bristles. It was scraping, like nails dragging across the floorboards. "You left your mess," she murmured. "You never clean. You never pay. You don't belong here." Ronnie grabbed Beth's hand and yanked her toward the hallway. "Go to the bedroom," she shouted. "The window, try the window." They ran. Behind them, the sound of sweeping followed steady, deliberate. The bedroom was darker than it should have been. When Ronnie tried to switch on the lamp, it sparked, then died. The faint glow from outside was gone too, swallowed by something thick and shifting, like fog pressed against the glass. Beth was sobbing now, her words barely coherent. "It's her place. It's her place." Ronnie tried to steady her. "We can break the glass. Come on, help me." They grabbed a chair together and hurled it at the window. It struck and bounced back. The glass rippled again, liquid and solid all at once. Ronnie screamed in frustration, kicking the wall. "What do you want from us?" The answer came immediately. From behind the door, Penny's voice soft, almost kind. "Rent. Always rent." The doorknob turned. Beth pressed herself into the corner, shaking her head violently. "No, no, no." Ronnie grabbed the dresser and shoved it against the door. The wood groaned under pressure as the handle twisted harder. Then came the scratching. From inside the walls. Faint at first, then louder like nails, digging, dragging. The plaster began to crack in thin spiderweb lines, crawling outward in all directions. Ronnie stumbled back, gasping. "She's coming through the wall." Beth looked up and screamed. A hand, pale and veined, emerged from the crack, fingers stretching toward the ceiling. Another followed. Then Penny's face began to push through the plaster, silent and expressionless. Her voice was everywhere now, whispering in stereo. "You moved in without asking. You owe." Ronnie grabbed Beth and pulled her toward the closet. They slammed the door behind them, plunging into pitch blackness. Inside, they could still hear it, the slow scraping of the broom, moving closer. Then, silence. For a moment, Ronnie dared to hope. She reached out for Beth's hand, but Beth wasn't breathing. Her body was stiff, her eyes wide open, her lips pale. Ronnie shook her violently. "Beth, Beth." No response. And then, from outside the closet, whispering, not Penny's voice this time, Beth's. "I told you we should have signed it." Ronnie froze. Beth's voice again, but from the other side of the door. "I signed, Ronnie. I signed for both of us." The closet door creaked open slowly, gently. Rodney looked up. Standing there was Beth, smiling faintly, her face gray and waxy. Her fingers clutched the contract. Her name and Ronnie's both now glowed red beneath Penny's signature. "It's okay," Beth said softly. "We can stay now." Behind her, Penny stood silently, the broom tucked neatly against her arm. Rodney screamed, but the sound never left the closet. Days later, the apartment was quiet again. The lights worked. The temperature was normal. The smell of jasmine lingered faintly, pleasant now. The new tenants, 2 graduate students named Lila and Chris, signed their lease with Mr. Patel, who smiled kindly and handed over the keys. When Lila asked if anyone had lived there before, he hesitated. "A few students," he said finally. "They moved out suddenly." That night, as Lila unpacked in the living room, she found something taped under the coffee table, a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt. Rent paid in full. Penny Harlow, Ronnie Lynn, Bethany Lake. Lila frowned, placing it aside. From the corner of the room, a faint scent of jasmine drifted through the air. Then, from the hallway, came the sound of sweeping. Slow, steady, patient. The first night in apartment 3B passed almost peacefully. Lila and Chris had laughed off the strange noises, the old wiring, even the creaky personality of the floorboards. After all, the place was cheap by Chicago standards, and they were broke grad students. Cheap rent always came with quirks, but by the second night, the quirks started to feel deliberate. When Chris turned on the kitchen light, it flickered 3 times before stabilizing always 3. The thermostat would reset itself to 68 degrees Fahrenheit no matter how many times Lila changed it. And every time she walked past the hallway mirror, her reflection seemed to be a half-second behind. Small things, but they added up. By the end of the week, the apartment felt like it was waiting for something. "Lila, the closet's locked again," Chris called from the bedroom. "Did you do that?" "No," she answered, setting down her mug. She frowned. She'd just folded some clothes in there that morning. The door was indeed locked. Not jammed, locked. Chris twisted the handle harder, grunting. This building's ancient, probably warped, but the sound that came back wasn't wood creaking. It was a metallic click, deliberate, measured, like someone locking it from the inside. They stared at each other. Then something moved under the door. A folded piece of paper slid into view. Chris picked it up, and both of them froze when they saw the neat cursive handwriting. Rent due. First warning. By midnight, they couldn't sleep. The apartment was too still. The air smelled faintly floral, sweet but stale, like dried petals pressed between pages. Chris stayed in bed scrolling through his phone, pretending not to hear the faint sound of sweeping coming from the living room. Lila lay beside him, eyes wide open. "Do you hear that?" He hesitated, thumb hovering over his screen. Probably the neighbors. They didn't have neighbors on that side. At 12:17 a.m., the sweeping stopped. A moment later, the thermostat beeped softly, resetting to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Then came a voice, through the apartment's old intercom system. It was faint, crackling, but unmistakably calm and feminine. "Tenants of apartment 3B, it said. "This property is overdue. Payment required." Chris sat up. "What the hell?" The intercom crackled again. "This is your final notice." Morning brought no relief. They decided to call the landlord. Mr. Patel sounded genuinely confused. "I haven't accessed your intercom. It's disconnected, has been for years," he said. "You must be hearing interference." "Interference that knows our unit number?" Chris snapped. Mr. Patel hesitated. "Listen, if it keeps happening, I can send maintenance. But don't go messing with the wiring. That building's touchy." After he hung up, the air felt heavier. That night, Lila found another note, this time taped to the fridge. "Rent due. Second warning." Underneath, in different ink, someone had scrawled, "Get out. She doesn't like squatters." By the third night, the apartment started to shift. It began with the photos on the wall, The frames turned slightly, one by one, all tilting to the left. Then came the faint scratching behind the walls, under the floorboards. When Chris checked the utility closet, the scratching stopped. But something else caught his attention. A faint smell of cleaning solution, sharp and chemical. He turned to Lila. "Were you mopping?" She shook her head. He pointed down. A single wet streak trailed from the closet toward the living room, like a mop dragged across the floor. Lila's face went pale. "Chris." There were footprints in the wetness. Bare, small, precise. They led straight to the couch. At 3:02 a.m., Lila woke to the sound of keys jingling. She sat up in bed, straining to listen. It wasn't Chris. He was beside her, sound asleep. The sound came again, metallic, rhythmic. Click, jingle, click. Someone was unlocking their door from the outside. She shook Chris awake, panic tightening her throat. "Chris, someone's at the door." He sat up groggily. "What?" Then they both heard it. The deadbolt sliding back. Chris grabbed the nearest thing, a lamp, and crept toward the door. He reached for the knob. The door swung open on its own. No one stood there, just the faint smell of jasmine and a voice, so quiet they almost missed it. Late again. The lamp slipped from Chris's hand and shattered. When they looked down, they saw it. An old broom leaning neatly against the doorway, bristles worn to nothing. The haunting changed after that. It was no longer about fear. It was enforcement. Drawers rearranged themselves. Dishes were stacked in perfect order. The windowsills gleamed. Every morning they woke to find the apartment cleaner, tidier unnaturally so, and always. That faint smell of jasmine. Chris tried to move out. He emailed Mr. Patel, posted listings, even packed boxes. But every morning, the boxes were empty again. Everything back in its place. When he finally tried to haul one out the door, the handle burned his skin. Lila found him shaking, clutching his hand, the shape of a key ring branded into his palm. That night, the intercom came on again. "Unauthorized removal of property," Penny's voice said calmly. "Violation of lease terms." Chris threw a chair at the wall. "We didn't sign anything." There was silence. Then, faintly paper rustling. "You inherited the lease," the voice replied. Lila broke first. She started talking to the unseen presence, softly at first, asking for permission before touching things, whispering apologies when doors stuck or drawers slammed shut. Chris begged her to stop. "She wants obedience," he said. "That's how she gets in." Lila's eyes were dull. "She's already in. We're just guests." When Chris woke one morning to find her kneeling in the living room, scrubbing the floor with trembling hands, he nearly screamed. "Lila, what are you doing?" She said, "The rent's late," she murmured. "We have to make it right." The broom stood beside her, upright on its own, like a watchful figure. Chris grabbed her shoulders. "You're scaring me." She said, "If we clean up, we can stay." Who said? But he didn't need to finish. The air around them rippled, heavy with perfume. The broom fell with a soft thud. The final night came quietly. Chris woke to silence, the kind that pressed on your ears. Lila's side of the bed was empty. He found her in the hallway, staring at the wall. Her lips moved soundlessly. Her eyes were black, pupils dilated to nothing. "Lila." She turned slowly. In her hand was a folded paper, the same contract Ronnie and Beth had signed years ago. Only now, 3 new lines glowed faintly in red ink. Lila Wynn, Christopher Hale, witness, Penny Harlow. "I didn't sign," Chris whispered. Lila smiled weakly. "You didn't have to. I did it for both of us." Behind her, the air began to twist, warping like heat over asphalt. Penny emerged, not as a ghostly wraith, but solid, substantial. A woman shaped from memory and routine, carrying her broom and keys, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "This property is occupied," she said. Chris backed away, shaking his head. "You're dead. Tenants don't die," she interrupted softly. "They just stay." He turned to run, but the hallway had shifted. The walls were closing in, narrowing until his shoulders brushed both sides. He ran faster, heart hammering, but every door led back to the same living room. Penny stood in the center, waiting. "Rent must be paid," she said. Chris screamed, grabbed the contract, and tore it apart. The moment the paper ripped, the lights exploded. A hurricane of voices filled the apartment. Ronnie, Beth, others he didn't know, all overlapping, all whispering the same word. "Oh." Chris collapsed, clutching his ears, the sound drilling into his skull. When the lights came back on, Penny was gone. So was Lila. The only thing left on the floor was the broom and a checkbook. The top page was already filled out. Pay to the order of Penny Harlow. Amount, 1 life. Chris's hand began to move without his control. He signed. The moment his pen left the paper, the apartment sighed, walls settling, air clearing, silence returning. He stood there for a moment, blank and calm. Then he picked up the broom and began sweeping. Slow, careful, meticulous. When the police arrived 3 days later, called by a neighbor who'd reported strange smells, they found the apartment spotless. No signs of struggle. No dust, no dirt, no fingerprints. Just a faint scent of jasmine. And on the kitchen table, a neatly folded lease agreement. 5 names were written on it. 4 were faded. 1 was fresh. Christopher Hale. The apartment was sealed off. Yellow police tape fluttered limply in the Chicago wind, stuck to the cold metal door of Unit 3B like an unhealed wound. The smell of jasmine still lingered faintly beneath the stench of mold and stale air, a ghostly perfume that refused to die. Officer Miller, who'd been first on the scene 2 weeks ago, stood in the hallway again. He wasn't supposed to be there. The building was condemned, but he couldn't shake the case. 2 young women dead in their beds, heart stopped, no signs of struggle, no drugs, no forced entry. He didn't believe in hauntings. Not really, but he did believe in things that stayed. He slid the tape aside and pushed the door open. A thin layer of dust drifted down, disturbed for the first time since the investigation had closed. Inside, Unit 3B looked like a shrine of abandonment. Dishes were still in the sink, crusted and dry. A blanket lay half-folded on the couch. 2 half-drunk mugs of coffee sat cold on the table. The lights, as before, refused to turn on. He clicked on his flashlight, and there, on the kitchen counter, was the pen. An old, gold-tipped fountain pen, lying perfectly straight on a folded piece of paper. Miller frowned. He didn't remember this being logged in evidence. He leaned closer. The paper underneath was a printed rental agreement, same as the one he'd seen before, except now it looked newer, the ink fresh. His flashlight beam trembled as he read the tenant list. Tenants: Veronica Hull, Elizabeth Crane, Penelope Hart. He froze. That name, Penelope Hart, was the same one scribbled on the original lease from 1947, the one the girls had joked about when the landlord handed them the keys. He flipped the paper over. Someone had written, in jagged handwriting, "Rent paid. Occupancy continues." The pen rolled by itself, as though nudged by an unseen hand. Downstairs, the building superintendent, a tired man named Frank, was talking to a young real estate agent. The city wanted the place demolished, but a private buyer had come forward, someone who, oddly, insisted the building not be touched until inspected personally. As Miller walked out of the apartment, he saw the agent looking up the stairwell, eyes wide. "Hey," she called. "Are you the inspector?" Miller blinked. "No, just checking something." The woman frowned. "I thought someone was already up there. I heard vacuuming." Miller turned back toward the 3rd floor. The silence was thick, but then faintly came a whirring hum, a domestic sound, a house being cleaned. He gripped the railing and climbed again, slower this time. The apartment door was ajar now. Light flickered inside. Not electric, but warm candlelight. The smell of jasmine filled the hall. Miller reached for his gun before realizing how ridiculous that felt, as if bullets could matter here. He stepped inside. The furniture had shifted. Everything had been rearranged neatly. the couch centered, the chairs pulled close to the coffee table. On the walls, dust was gone, surfaces gleamed like someone had spent the morning scrubbing. And sitting on the couch, her back turned, was a woman in a long gray dress. Her hair, dark and pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, gleamed like wet ink. "Ma'am?" Miller said quietly. She didn't move. He circled around slow, deliberate. The air around her felt heavy, like static before lightning. When he finally saw her face, his heart stopped. She looked alive, middle-aged, pale, eyes the color of clouded glass. She was holding a ledger, writing inside it with that same golden pen. Miller swallowed. "Ma'am, this apartment is under investigation." She spoke without looking up. Her voice was calm, old-fashioned, and devastatingly human. "It's been settled. The rent's paid. The room is mine again." He took a step forward. "Who are you?" She finally lifted her gaze, and when she smiled, it was both kind and cruel. "I'm the tenant, Officer Miller. You're trespassing." The next morning, Frank found the door sealed again. This time, the lock was new. No one had authorized a change. The police returned, broke the door open, and found the room empty, spotless, except for one thing, a small note taped to the wall where the lease used to hang. It read, "No vacancias." Months later, the building was finally bought by a woman named Lydia Hart, a distant relative of someone who'd once lived there. She planned to turn it into affordable student housing again. The construction crews began clearing debris, painting walls, installing new fixtures. The work went fast except for Unit 3B. Every time they tried to enter, the door jammed. Tools disappeared. Paint cans overturned themselves. Workers complained of headaches and sleep paralysis after spending too long near that end of the hall. Lydia, irritated, finally decided to handle it herself. She came one night, alone, key in hand. The key slid in, easily, too easily. The lock clicked open, with an oddly satisfying sound like a sigh. The door creaked. Inside, everything was furnished. Not new antique. The kind of furniture that belonged to another century. Mahogany dresser, lace curtains, porcelain lamp. And on the kitchen counter, sitting primly next to a jar of sugar, was a rent ledger. Her name, Lydia Hart, was written neatly on the last line. She frowned, flipping through. The handwriting was delicate and looping, dated decades back. Each name had been neatly crossed out except one, Penelope Hart, dated November 2nd, 1947. Lydia's breath caught. She looked around the room, pulse quickening. The air was heavy with jasmine. Something glimmered in the mirror above the sink. A reflection that wasn't hers. A woman stood behind her, holding a broom. "Excuse me," the woman said softly. "You're standing in my way." Lydia spun, but no one was there. The broom leaned by the wall, unmoved. 1 year later, a new listing appears online. For rent, cozy 2-bedroom, apartment near campus. Recently renovated. Historic charm. Previous to non-left. Unexpectedly. $950 divided by month, utilities included. Attached was a photo of the living room, well lit, clean, inviting. If you looked closely, however, the mirror in the corner showed something the camera hadn't meant to capture. A faint silhouette of a woman in a gray dress, sweeping the floor. The listing was posted under a username, P. Hart47. Outside, as the evening fog rolled across the campus, the building seemed to breathe. The windows flickered with light, sometimes candlelight, sometimes just the reflection of passing cars, and in the quiet of the night, if you pressed your ear against the cold front door of Unit 3B, you could still hear it, the faint rhythmic click of a lock turning, as though someone inside was still securing their home, still making sure no one would ever leave again. Rent paid. Occupancy continue. Helm, the 20th. Birthday omen. The carnival lights blinked like dying stars along the edge of the Oregon woods. They shimmered against the fog, pinks, greens, and yellows like some living thing breathing in the dark. The air was cold, sharp, with the scent of pine and gasoline. Somewhere, a Ferris wheel creaked, and laughter carried faintly from the main field, stretched thin by the wind. Alex Miller shoved his hands into his jacket pockets and tried to ignore the way his heart kept thudding faster than the carnival music. His 20th birthday had started out fine, a normal day, full of jokes, texts from friends, and Sarah's soft kiss on his cheek when she'd surprised him with a cupcake. But now, as the two of them walked toward the flickering entrance sign that read, Hollow Ridge Carnival, one night only, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the woods. Maybe it was the words his grandmother used to whisper every year on his birthday. Keep the charm close, Alex. It'll guard you until you're grown. But once you turn 20, don't lose it. Not that year. He reached instinctively for the wooden amulet hanging around his neck. A small oval charm carved from cedar, etched with a faint spiral. The edges had been worn smooth by time. He'd worn it since he could remember. Except his fingers brushed only fabric. He froze. Sarah, he said, his voice thin. Wait. Hold up. She turned, smiling under the yellow glow of the carnival bulbs. She was wearing her favorite red beanie, cheeks flushed from the cold. What? You okay? My amulet, he said, patting his chest, then his pockets, then the collar of his jacket. It's gone. Sarah frowned. The wooden thing? The one from your grandma? He nodded, his pulse quickening. I had it earlier. I swear I did. I must have dropped it somewhere. Probably in the car, she said. We can check after. But Alex didn't move. Something inside him, small and instinctive, whispered no. He looked back down the dirt path that led to the parking area. The fog was heavier there now, coiling like smoke around the lampposts. For a second, he thought he saw a faint shape, a woman's outline, standing near the tree line, watching. He blinked. It was gone. Hey, Sarah squeezed his arm. You're fine, okay? It's just a necklace. He wanted to tell her it wasn't just a necklace, that it had been given to him when he was 6, after his parents died in a car crash, that his grandmother had pressed it into his hand, whispering, "This will keep you safe from the year that takes what it wants." But instead, he forced a smile. Yeah, just a necklace. The carnival was louder inside the field, a whirl of laughter, neon lights, fried dough, and spinning rides. A man in a cracked clown mask shouted something about free fortunes from a booth decorated with dangling bells. The air shimmered with the hum of generators. They played a few games. Sarah threw rings onto glass bottles and won a stuffed black cat. Alex pretended to laugh when she made it meow at him. For a while, it almost felt normal. But every now and then, Alex felt it, the tug in his chest, an emptiness where the amulet used to rest. And under the carnival noise, he thought he could still hear a faint clink like something wooden knocking gently against stone. Somewhere behind him, when the lights flickered for the first time that night, he noticed. It was small, just a single row of bulbs dimming near the carousel, but the flicker felt intentional, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. Sarah didn't notice. She was laughing, her hair whipping in the cold. "Let's find something scarier," she said. "I heard they've got a mirror maze somewhere." Alex hesitated. A mirror maze? Yeah, it's called the House of Reflections. Over there, past the Ferris wheel. Her excitement was contagious, but that feeling, that wrong, crawling chill came back. Still, he followed her. They passed an old sign half buried in mud, its paint peeling. He glanced at it as they walked. The 20th birthday, in fortune tent. He stopped. "Wait," he said. "Sarah, look." She turned back. "What is it?" "That sign, look at the name." She read it out loud and laughed. "Omen? That's so dramatic. Probably another fortune teller booth." Alex's mouth felt dry. "It says 20th birthday." "So, you are 20. He didn't answer. The fog was thick now, curling through the booths like white smoke. Something about the air felt different. Heavy. Charged. He glanced around and there, on the ground beside his shoe, something glimmered under the carnival light. He crouched. It was the amulet, but the wood looked darker now, soaked like it had been left in rainwater. And in the center, carved where there hadn't been anything before, was a faint crack, a hairline fracture splitting the spiral pattern in two. He reached for it. The moment his fingers brushed the charm, he heard something, a woman's whisper, right next to his ear. "You were warned." He jerked back, heart hammering. "Alex?" Sarah asked. "What is it?" He forced a laugh. "Nothing. Just thought I heard someone." But as they walked on, he kept glancing over his shoulder, and each time, in the far distance past the Ferris wheel, past the fog, he swore he saw a shadow keeping pace with them. A tall woman, gray-haired, wearing something old-fashioned, and though she never moved closer, Alex could swear she was smiling. They found the House of Mirrors near the edge of the field. The structure leaned slightly, as though it had been built decades ago and forgotten. Its sign hung crooked, painted letters barely legible. "The Hall of Reflection, see your true self." Sarah grinned. "Come on, birthday boy. Time to face your destiny." He almost said no. Every nerve in his body screamed to turn around, but Sarah was already inside, her laughter echoing. He hesitated, the amulet clutched in his hand. The crack down its center seemed deeper now. He whispered half to himself, "Grandma, if you can hear me, I didn't mean to lose it." Then he stepped through the door. The air inside the mirror house was colder than the night outside. The music from the carnival was muffled, warped by the maze of glass. Every reflection caught him from a strange angle, dozens of Alexis walking with him, faces slightly off. Too pale, too still. "Sarah?" he called. Her voice came faintly from somewhere ahead. "This way." But when he turned the corner, her reflection was everywhere. A dozen Sarahs smiling in the dark, moving independently of each other. "Sarah." A laugh. Then another. He couldn't tell which was real. The mirrors pulsed faintly, as if breathing. His reflection tilted its head slightly, just a fraction too slow. Then one of them smiled. But he hadn't. He stumbled back. What the hell? From deep inside the maze came the sound of something wood cracking, like the snap of a branch. His amulet trembled in his palm. And then, faintly, a whisper threaded through the hall, soft as a sigh. "It breaks, or you do." The lights flickered. For the first time, Alex wanted to run. Outside, the carnival music glitched again, the carousel slowing to a crawl. A single note repeated over and over, distorted and wrong. A group of teenagers near the popcorn stand turned, frowning. One muttered, "Did the lights just dim?" Somewhere. The Ferris wheel creaked to a stop, but no one noticed the way the fog was thickening around the Hall of Mirrors, swallowing it whole until only its dim sign could be seen. And inside, Alex was still searching, calling Sarah's name, his voice echoing infinitely. He didn't notice that one reflection directly behind him had stopped moving altogether. He just watched him, eyes bright, smiling wider and wider, until the crack across his amulet split completely in two. The carnival had changed by the time they returned from the food stalls. It was subtle at first, the kind of shift you only notice once you stop talking. Alex had been telling Sarah a story about his grandmother's superstitions, the kind of thing he used to laugh at, the wooden charm that hung around his neck since childhood. The one he had lost somewhere along the road tonight had always been the centerpiece of that story. His grandmother used to say, "When you turn 20, that charm will keep your soul from splitting." He didn't believe in curses. But since losing it, a kind of pressure had been building in his chest, as though the night itself had grown aware of his carelessness. Now, walking down the central row of tents, he noticed something else. The lights above them buzzed too loudly. The strings of bulbs swayed even though the air had gone completely still. The laughter from the crowd sounded a few seconds late, as if someone was replaying the world with bad timing. Sarah squeezed his hand. "Alex, did we pass that booth before?" He looked around. The cotton candy stand. The red and white Ferris wheel in the distance. The crooked banner reading, Welcome to St. Helens Harvest Fair. It did look familiar, but then every carnival looked the same after dark. I think we just looped around, he said, trying to sound casual. Come on, the main path splits somewhere up ahead. We'll take the other side. They reached it within a minute. A literal fork in the carnival's layout. 2 archways faced them, each decorated with blinking bulbs and gaudy painted signs. To the left, the Wheel of Fortune, spin your fate. To the right, the House of Mirrors, see what watches back. Sarah's eyes lit up. Oh my God, that one looks perfect for a photo, she said, tugging him toward the right. Alex froze. A pulse of dread went through him, small but deep, like the first crack of ice before it breaks. He didn't know why. Maybe it was the way the sign flickered, or how the bulbs on the word mirrors kept dying out one by one. Let's do the wheel, he said too quickly. Games are safer. And less creepy. Sarah laughed. What, are you scared of your own reflection? He wanted to laugh back. He really did. But the word reflection hit him like a cold hand pressed to the back of his neck. He remembered his grandmother's voice again, the way she said, "Your soul will split." And, no, he said, something clanged behind them. A game booth's bell, the kind you hit with a mallet. But when they turned, no one was there. The booth sat empty, the mallet lying on the counter, still trembling from an invisible hand. Sarah gave him a look that was half amusement, half unease. Okay, she said softly. That was weird. They stood in silence for a moment. The crowd around them kept moving, oblivious, yet no one seemed to walk close enough to brush past them. The space around Alex and Sarah felt like a bubble, a small radius of isolation in a place meant for noise. Let's just go, Alex muttered. 10 minutes, then we leave. Sarah hesitated, then nodded. She led the way toward the House of Mirrors. The entrance was framed with strings of lights that flickered like candle flames. A cheap fog machine filled the doorway with mist that smelled faintly of vinegar. Inside, the carnival music was soft or warped, slowed down, and slightly off-key, like a record dragging under a dying battery. Okay, Sarah said, her voice echoing against the mirrored walls. Rule 1, don't split up. Alex nodded, gripping her hand tighter. The floor creaked beneath them. Rows of mirrors reflected back dozens of versions of themselves, some warped, others eerily normal. Alex caught his reflection in one that looked perfectly clean and true, except his reflection wasn't holding Sarah's hand. He blinked. The reflection blinked back, then smiled. Sarah, he said quietly, let's go back. But she was already a few feet ahead, laughing at how distorted her face looked in one of the funhouse mirrors. You have to see this one, she said. I look like... Her voice cut off. Alex turned the corner and froze. Sarah stood in front of a mirror that didn't distort her. It duplicated her. There were 2 reflections of her now, side by side. Both smiled, both breathed. But when she moved her arm, only one reflection followed. The other one stayed still, smiling wider. Sarah, the mirror cracked down the middle, a thin, hairline fracture that sounded more like a sigh than a break. The lights flickered. The carnival music faded completely. For a moment, everything went black. When the lights came back, the air was colder. Sarah was gone. Alex spun around. Sarah. Only his voice answered him, multiplied into 100 echoes that whispered his name back in different tones, some too low, some too soft. He ran through the maze, palms slapping against glass, breath fogging up the mirrors. He saw flashes of her, or what looked like her in the reflections. One version was laughing, one was crying, one was standing perfectly still, watching him run. Each time he reached a corner, she vanished again. Stop it, he shouted at the mirrors. Where are you? The mirrors didn't answer, but the reflection of himself began to move out of sync. When he took a step forward, his reflection hesitated. Then it tilted its head slowly, studying him with the same expression he'd seen earlier, that wrong, detached smile. Then it mouthed something. He leaned closer. "You shouldn't have lost it." Alex stumbled back, heart pounding. What did you say?" His reflection blinked. Blood-red words began to bloom on the glass, as if someone was writing from the other side. "I keep what you drop." He didn't wait. He turned and ran. The corridors twisted, doubling back, folding into themselves. Every turn brought him to another mirror, another version of him staring back with the same accusing look. He found an exit sign glowing faintly at the end of a narrow hall. He sprinted toward it, slammed into the door, and found himself outside, gasping in the cool night air. The carnival was still there. Crowds still laughed. Rides still turned. But something was wrong with the sky. It had deepened from dark blue to near black, and the moon looked closer. He checked his phone. No signal. No time display. He turned to look for Sarah. A group of teenagers passed by, their faces painted white and gold for the festival. He called out to them, asking if they'd seen a girl, black jacket, red scarf, blonde hair. They didn't answer, didn't even turn. One of them brushed past him and vanished, just gone, no trace, no sound. Alex stood frozen. His breath fogged the air like smoke. Then he saw it. By the carnival's main gate, the same gate they had entered hours ago, something glimmered on the ground under a flickering light. He walked toward it slowly, his shoes crunching over gravel. It was his amulet, the wooden charm, the one he'd lost. It lay cracked in half, one side darker than the other, the break jagged like teeth marks. He bent down to pick it up, and the moment his fingers brushed the wood, he heard Sarah's voice faint, right behind him. "Alex." He turned around. Sarah was standing a few yards away. She looked pale, but otherwise fine. "Where did you go?" he asked, voice trembling. She smiled, the same bright, easy smile she always had, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "You dropped something," she said softly. "You should be careful with gifts." He nodded, still catching his breath. "Yeah, I thought I'd lost it for good." "You did." Her tone was flat now, calm, final. When she reached for his hand, her skin was ice cold. He didn't say anything more. He just walked beside her, away from the carnival lights. Behind them, the bulbs along the gate flickered one last time, then went out. The air inside the mirror house was colder than outside, unnaturally so. The moment Alex and Sarah stepped through the beaded curtain, the noise of the carnival dulled, swallowed by an echoing silence that made every breath sound too loud. Rows of mirrors stood at strange angles, forming a glittering labyrinth. Strings of colored bulbs flickered overhead, some dying, some stuttering like a heart in panic. A faint smell of damp wood and perfume sweet, cloying and old, hung in the air. Sarah squeezed Alex's hand. "You okay?" Alex forced a grain. "Yeah, just déjà vu." But déjà vu didn't feel like this. His pulse was thudding in his throat. His reflection, multiplied endlessly, seemed to blink out of sync, like one of them was reacting half a second too slow. Sarah laughed lightly. "You're not scared, are you?" He shrugged, trying to play along. "It's just mirrors." His one. Yet, the sound of their footsteps didn't match. Each echo came back late or early, or both. They moved deeper inside, following a looping corridor where the walls gleamed like liquid silver. Every so often, the mirrors warped, distorting Sarah's reflection, her smile melting into a grimace, her eyes hollowing out before snapping back to normal. Alex stopped. "Did you see that?" "What?" she asked. He pointed, but the image had already smoothed out. His reflection now stared blankly at him, mouth slightly open, as if waiting for him to say something. The laughter of children drifted faintly from somewhere deep in the maze, but no children had entered before them. Sarah brushed it off. "It's an effect, probably sensors or motion triggers." But her voice trembled. They turned another corner and found a mirror unlike the others, larger, older, framed with ornate carvings of twisting vines and faces, some smiling, some crying. A brass plate beneath read, "The True Face of Fate." Sarah reached out, tracing her reflection's cheek. Wow, it's beautiful. Alex's reflection smiled a moment before he did. Then it tilted its head, breaking sync entirely. His stomach clenched. Sarah stepped back. Her reflection turned too, but then in the mirror, her double didn't move back. Instead, it smiled and whispered something. Alex couldn't hear the words, but he saw her reflection's lips move. Come closer. Sarah frowned. What did you say? I didn't, Alex whispered. Then her reflection reached out of the glass. Only for a second, a flash of pale fingers brushing the surface like a ripple through water, but it was enough. Sarah screamed and stumbled backward, knocking into Alex. The mirror stilled. Both reflections now looked normal again. Except for one thing, Alex's reflection wasn't wearing the wooden amulet around his neck. He stared at his chest, empty. He hadn't worn it since it fell earlier that evening. His reflection wasn't missing it by accident. It was mocking him. Sarah tried to laugh it off again, but her voice broke mid-giggle. Okay, maybe we should just wait. Alex stepped closer to the mirror. Look at that corner. Behind us. In the reflection, something stood at the far end of the hall, tall, motionless, its face hidden in a mask shaped like a sundae. He turned around. The hall behind them was empty. When he looked back, the figure was closer. Sarah grabbed his arm. Alex, please, I don't like this. The lights flickered violently. The figure in the mirror smiled a wide, crooked grin painted red across its mask and began to move toward them, slow and deliberate, but not in the real hallway. Only inside the mirror. The sound of footsteps echoed all the same. Alex backed up, dragging Sarah by the wrist. They turned into another mirrored corridor, but now the paths didn't make sense. Every turn led them back to the same central mirror with the brass plate, the true face of fate. The figure's reflection now filled the glass, its face pressed against the inside surface, the painted grin stretching too wide, cracking the mask. Alex, Sarah whispered, what if this is part of the prophecy your grandma talked about? The amulet, she said, it protected you from your 20th year, right? Yeah, Alex said, his voice hollow, from something that was supposed to happen at 20. Well, maybe this is it. The reflection of the amulet glowed faintly in the mirror world, pulsing like a heartbeat. Sarah turned to him. We need to find it. Then, they searched frantically, pushing through corridors that seemed to loop and fold in on themselves. The mirrors flickered between worlds, their reflections no longer matching them at all. In one pane, Alex saw himself standing still while he moved. In another, Sarah's reflection smiled when she wasn't. Then on the floor he saw it, the amulet. It lay right before a mirror cracked diagonally from top to bottom, like a wound in the glass. He knelt, reaching for it, and his reflection didn't. Instead, the version of himself in the mirror leaned forward, grinning with blood-black gums. Sarah hissed, "Don't touch it," but he already had. The air rippled a deafening crack tore through the room. The mirror burst outward. Shards flew across the floor, slicing his palm. Through the hole in the mirror, Alex saw another room, a reversed version of the one they were in, and in it, another Sarah. But she wasn't holding his hand. She was walking toward the sun-masked man. Alex fell backward, bleeding, his head spinning. Sarah knelt beside him, pressing a hand over the cut. "It's okay. It's okay." The sound of whispering filled the space, hundreds of voices overlapping. Only one can leave. Balance must be paid. The charm demands a life. The amulet pulsed again, glowing red in his hand. Sarah stared at it. "Alex, what if this isn't protection anymore?" He looked up. "What do you mean? It's a trade." He shook his head. "No, it's supposed to save me." Her eyes glistened. "It will, but something has to take your place." The voices rose into a scream. The mirrors began to splinter, one by one, showing fragments of their lives. Alex as a child holding his grandmother's hand. Alex laughing with Sarah under summer light. Alex older, alone in a room full of mirrors. He understood. Then. The prophecy hadn't been a warning of death. It was a map to survival, paid by sacrifice. Sarah gripped his face in her hands. "You'll live. You have to." "Sarah, no." She kissed him once, trembling. Then she stood, eyes locked on the broken mirror, where the glow was strongest, where the amulet's twin reflection pulsed from the other side. Sarah stopped, but she only smiled, sad, resolute. The amulet needed a sacrifice, Alex. Before he could move, she hurled herself into the mirror. A blinding flash filled the maze white, then crimson. The air burst with the sound of shattering glass and echoing wind, followed by silence so complete it rang in his skull. When Alex opened his eyes, the mirrors were gone. Only fragments remained, littering the floor like ice, and the amulet still, in his bleeding hand, was warm. It had turned deep red. He screamed her name until his throat tore, but no voice answered. When rescuers found him the next morning, the carnival was abandoned. Every tent collapsed, every ride frozen in mid-turn. The mirror house was half buried in frost. They said he was lucky to be alive, but Alex knew better. Luck had nothing to do with it. He'd been chosen, and someone else had paid the price. The police said the carnival was a setup gone wrong, that a short circuit caused an explosion in one of the generators, collapsing the House of Mirrors. They ruled it an accident, but Alex knew better. He remembered the sound of Sarah's voice echoing through the glass. He remembered the glow of the amulet, the red veins crawling across its wooden surface, like it had drunk something alive. And he remembered her last words. The amulet needed a sacrifice. 2 weeks passed. Alex's dorm room felt smaller than before, like the walls had moved in. He hadn't gone to class, hadn't answered his parents' calls. The amulet hung on his desk lamp, its faint red stain visible even in the dark. Every night, he dreamed of mirrors. Sometimes they showed Sarah standing somewhere cold, whispering his name. Sometimes they showed nothing but a black shape pressed against the other side of the glass, waiting. He tried to throw the amulet away once. He took it to the river and hurled it as far as he could. But when he woke up the next morning, it was back, lying on his chest, wet, cold. By the third week, Alex started hearing the music. It came from nowhere, faint carousel music, warped and slowed down like a vinyl played in reverse. Sometimes it played from his phone even when it was off. Sometimes it echoed faintly from the walls. And then, one night, he saw the mirrors again, not in his dreams in real life. His dorm window reflected the carnival lights, even though the carnival grounds had been torn down. His reflection was smiling faintly, even when he wasn't. "Sarah?" he whispered. The reflection tilted its head. He stood there frozen, heart pounding, until the reflection mouthed a word. "Return." Then the glass cracked down the middle, and the reflection vanished. Alex drove back to the field in Oregon the next morning. The carnival grounds were empty, just a flat stretch of frost-bitten earth, surrounded by trees. He could still see the circular outline, where the tents used to stand. Something in him pulled toward the center. There, half buried in dirt, was the shattered frame of the Mirror House sign. The letters were faded, but he could still make out the brass plate beneath. The true face of fate. Alex knelt, brushing the frost off it. "Sarah," he whispered. Wind swept through the field, carrying the faint scent of perfume. Jasmine. His chest tightened. "Sarah?" A whisper drifted from behind him. "You kept it, didn't you?" He turned sharply. "Nothing. You wear it still." The voice came from the ground, this time low, layered, like it was speaking through the earth itself. Alex gripped the amulet. "You took her. Give her back." Silence. Then, softly, she chose. The air shimmered, and then the mirrors rose. One by one, fragments began lifting out of the dirt, thin, broken shards spinning in slow circles around him. His reflection fractured into dozens of copies, all staring at him from different angles. "She didn't deserve this," he shouted. "Neither did you," one reflection said. Its mouth didn't move, but he heard the voice inside his skull. Another reflection, one where he looked older, eyes hollow, whispered, "You were meant to die at 20. Someone had to pay." The shards trembled. One slashed his cheek as it passed. Blood hit the dirt and the ground absorbed it, blackening like ink. "Sarah!" He screamed again. "If you can hear me, tell me what to do." For a second, everything stopped. Then a faint flicker. Her reflection appeared on one of the shards. She looked pale, translucent, her hair floating like she was underwater. "Alex," her voice trembled. "It's not done. The amulet, it's not satisfied yet." He stumbled closer. "What do you mean?" "The balance is breaking," she said. "I took your place, but it keeps calling. It wants more. Then how do I stop it?" Her reflection started to fade. "Break it before it breaks you." The shard fell, shattering on the ground. Alex stared at the amulet in his hand. The carvings were pulsing again, faster now, matching his heartbeat. He realized something. It didn't just want blood. It wanted the prophecy fulfilled, no matter who stood in its way. That night, Alex returned to his dorm. He packed his things. The sound of the carousel was louder than ever, like the music was playing inside his ears. He stared at the amulet on the desk. It glowed faintly in the dark, the red veins pulsing under its surface. He picked up a hammer. "This ends now," he muttered. He raised it high, and the light went out. Total blackness. The hammer froze midair. Then, from the reflection on the window, a face emerged. Not Sarah's this time. It was his own, but older, twisted, eyes completely black. "You don't destroy what keeps you alive," the reflection whispered. Alex shook his head. "You're not real. Then why do you bleed when I do?" The reflection grinned and blood began dripping down the inside of the glass. He swung the hammer and smashed through the window, shattering the reflection. But when he looked at his hand, it was bleeding. Deeply. The shards of the broken window rattled on the floor, rearranging themselves until they formed a jagged circle, and in each fragment, a reflection dozens of Alex's, screaming silently, mouths wide. The amulet pulsed brighter. The lights flickered back on, and every mirror in the room cracked in unison. He fell to his knees, gasping. "What do you want from me?" A whisper slithered through the air, faint, but everywhere. "Completion." He looked around wildly. Completion of what? The cycle. Then, in one of the shards, he saw her again. Sarah. She looked terrified. "Alex," she whispered. "It's not after you anymore. It's after everyone who touched it. Anyone who tried to save you." He froze. "My parents. The police." She nodded slowly. "It's spreading." He looked down at the amulet. Its red glow bleeding into the walls like veins under skin. The curse wasn't contained to him anymore. He whispered, "I have to end it at the source." Sarah's reflection met his eyes. "Then you know where to go. The carnival grounds." "Yeah." That night, Alex returned to the frozen field one last time. The sky was black, the moon hidden. He stood in the middle of the field, clutching the amulet, and placed it on the ground. "I'm ending this," he said through gritted teeth. The wind picked up, carrying faint whispers. "You can't. You're part of it now. You're the vessel." He raised the hammer again, his hands trembling, and brought it down on the amulet. The wood split with a dry crack. A sound like a scream burst from the ground, not human, not animal, something in between. The earth split open in a jagged line, light pouring out like molten glass. Mirrors began rising from the dirt again, spinning faster, forming a ring around him. In every reflection, Sarah's face flickered, pleading, crying, screaming, until they all merged into one enormous, fractured image. Her voice filled the air. "You can't destroy fate, Alex. You can only take its place." He stared at the amulet, half broken, glowing brighter now. He realized the truth. To end it, he had to seal it again, with another life. The mirrors cracked louder, shards slicing through the air. He took a deep breath, clutching the half of the amulet that still glowed. Then he whispered, "Let it be mine." He pressed the glowing piece against his chest. The light swallowed him whole. The mirror shattered outward, and silence fell. Fivings. When the police arrived at the site the next day, all they found was a burned circle in the dirt and a single wooden amulet, split clean down the middle. Inside the report, one officer noted hearing faint carnival music that stopped the moment he picked it up. He swore he also heard a voice whisper, "The 20th year is over." The field was quiet again. No lights, no carnival, no sound but the soft rattle of dead leaves against frost. They said the fire had burned itself out before it could spread. The police didn't understand where the scourge marks came from. No accelerant, no footprints. Just a perfect circle, as if something had descended and seared the earth from within. The report called it an unexplained electrical discharge. Sarah's parents never found her body. Alex's parents buried an empty coffin, and the amulet split in two was stored in an evidence locker at the county sheriff's office. For 3 nights, the night guard swore he could hear faint carnival music whenever he walked by. By the 4th night, he stopped walking that hall altogether. 6 months later, the amulet was sent to the State University of Oregon's Department of Cultural Anthropology for further artifact analysis. Professor Harlan, 60, glasses always slipping down his nose, thought it was nonsense. He'd spent his life chasing genuine tribal artifacts, the kind with catalog provenance, not haunted heirlooms. Still, the thing was curious. A half-burned talisman of oak, carved with unfamiliar runes, not Celtic, not Norse, something homemade. And beneath the soot, faint traces of red lacquer, like blood, soaked into the wood. He dictated into his recorder, Item 0046, local folklore, allegedly linked to a fatal incident in Benton County, unverified supernatural claims, sample testing to follow. He paused, examining the wood under his desk lamp. "It almost looks like it's breathing," he muttered. He meant it as a joke, but then the carving pulsed, just once a small contraction under the surface, like a muscle twitch. He blinked. The amulet was still. He leaned closer. "Optical illusion," he said aloud. "Maybe from the lighting." He clicked the recorder off. That night, Professor Harlan dreamed of mirrors. He stood inside a carnival tent, surrounded by 1,000 reflections. In each reflection, he was slightly different. Younger, older, with blood on his hands or smiling or screaming. And in every one, a red glow pulsed at his throat. He woke up gasping. The clock read 2:20 a.m. The amulet sat on his bedside table. He was sure he'd left it in the lab. And over the following week, strange things began happening around campus. Lab lights flickered at night, leaving scorch marks on the linoleum. Students reported hearing carnival music in the courtyard. And once, when the janitor mopped the anthropology wing, he found words scratched faintly into the floor tiles. 20 is forever. Professor Harlan grew pale and haggard. He started locking his office door from the inside. When his assistant, Mia, knocked to deliver paperwork, she heard him whispering through the door a rhythmic chant she couldn't understand. When she finally peeked through the window, she saw him holding the amulet, pressing it against his chest, whispering, "Not me. Take another." By the time they broke down the door, the office was empty. No professor, no blood, just the amulet, glowing faintly red, resting on a stack of papers titled The 20-Year Cycle. Pattern or prophecy? Mia took the amulet home. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't believe in curses. But that night, she dreamed of a man calling her name from behind a broken mirror. His face was familiar. She recognized it from the case photos she'd seen while cataloging artifacts. "Alex, don't touch it," he said. "It's awake again." She tried to back away, but her reflection didn't move. Instead, it leaned closer. "Do you know what happens every 20 years? It whispered. Mia shook her head. The reflection smiled faintly. "Someone new turns 20. She woke up to the sound of carnival music playing softly from her phone. The screen showed no app running, no call, no video. Just the faint static hum of the tune. She threw the phone aside, and that's when she saw it. The amulet was glowing again, brighter now, its cracks pulsing red like veins. Her breath caught. From the corner of the room, the mirror flickered. A face appeared, a girl's, smiling faintly, her hair floating as though she were underwater. "Sarah?" Mia whispered. The reflection tilted its head. "You found it." Mia swallowed hard. "What are you?" "I was the balance," Sarah said softly. "I was the one who kept it from spreading. But it's broken now. It's looking for another anchor." "And what happens if it finds one?" Sarah looked down. Then the cycle begins again. The lights flickered. Mia turned and saw the shadow of a carousel spinning across the wall, its horses twisting and melting into human shapes. The amulet lifted from the table, hanging in midair. A whisper filled the room, dozens of voices overlapping. "Choose." Mia shook her head, trembling. "Choose what? Who stays? Who goes?" Sarah's reflection flickered, her voice breaking. "It's not asking you to wear it, Mia. It's asking you to feed it." The voices grew louder, chanting, echoing like wind through the carnival. "Choose, choose, choose." Mia screamed and grabbed the amulet, throwing it at the mirror. The glass shattered, a blinding flash, and the world went silent. Adeline. When Mia opened her eyes, she was standing in a field, the same field from the photos. The frost glittered under a red sky, and before her stood the house of mirrors whole again. The carousel light spinning in lazy circles behind it. Sarah stood at the doorway, her face pale but peaceful. "You brought it back," she said. Mia turned slowly. "Where's Alex?" Sarah looked down. "He's part of it now. He's what keeps it from unraveling." "Then why me?" Sarah's voice was soft, almost kind. "Because you touched the amulet. Because you heard its song." Mia took a step back. "I don't want this." Sarah smiled sadly. "Neither did I." End 4. The mirror house doors opened, with a long creak. "Go," Sarah said, "before it chooses someone else." Mia hesitated. "What happens if I don't?" Sarah's reflection in the glass looked older now, hollow-eyed, trembling. "Then the carnival never ends." Inside, the air was still and cold. The mirrors stretched into infinity, reflecting carnival lights that no longer existed. In each reflection, Mia saw herself, but older, younger, distorted. Then one reflection moved when she didn't. It smiled and whispered, 20. The amulet pulsed red in her hand, searing her skin. Mia screamed and hurled it to the floor. It didn't break this time. It grew. The cracks spread outward like roots, glowing brighter, forming a circle beneath her feet. She realized, too late, that the curse wasn't an object, it was a doorway, and she had just opened it. Outside, in the real world, the carnival returned. Not the old one, not the abandoned wreck, but a brand new carnival, built overnight in the same field. Bright, clean, full of laughter. Posters read, "The Return of the Mirror House." Grand reopening. No one questioned where it came from. No one noticed the faint scent of jasmine in the air. And on opening night, when a girl named Mia Harper disappeared inside the Hall of Mirrors and never came back, people said it was just a tragic accident. The police found nothing. Except, weeks later, when the carnival packed up to move again, a wooden amulet was found in the dirt. It was red, unbroken, and still warm. Every 20 years, they say, A new carnival appears, always different, always new, always somewhere someone turns 20. And if you listen closely, when the lights go out and the crowd goes home, you can hear a voice whisper through the mirrors. The amulet keeps us safe, as long as someone wears it. Then the faint music of a carousel begins slow, distant, almost kind, until you realize the tune has no ending. It just keeps going, forever. When the police arrived at the field just outside Millhaven, there was nothing. No Ferris wheel, no carousel, no booths, no flickering bulbs struggling to hold onto their light, only a wide stretch of grass flattened into spiral patterns, as if something heavy had once stood there and vanished overnight. Alex sat on the back of an ambulance, a gray blanket around his shoulders, hands trembling around a cup of coffee he couldn't drink. His eyes were vacant, his breath fogged in the chill. He kept repeating one thing, over and over, in a low rasp. There was a carnival here. She was here. You have to find her. But the officers looked at one another, tired, uncertain, already writing him off as another trauma case. A detective crouched down in front of him, his voice steady, rehearsed. "Son, we've been here for years. This field's empty. There hasn't been a carnival in Millhaven since 1984. Alex blinked, trying to process that number. The world tilted slightly, as if he were still trapped inside those mirrors. That was the year his grandmother was born. Or no, the year she was 20. The year she'd lost her fiancé in a carnival fire that took dozens of lives. The one she never talked about, except in her final days. When she pressed the amulet into his hand and whispered, "When you turn 20, remember the carnival always returns." He thought she was senile then. Just stories of an old woman clinging to ghosts. Now the ghosts had names. He was released that morning after signing some forms. The officers promised to follow up, but didn't ask for a forwarding address. They didn't need to, no one ever did. He didn't go home. He couldn't. He wandered instead through back roads and gas stations, through fog and silence, until he reached his grandmother's old cabin in the woods north of town. The windows were boarded up, the chimney choked with moss. Yet as he stepped inside, the air felt expectant, as if someone had been waiting for him. The amulet lay heavy in his pocket, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The cabin was smaller than he remembered. The wallpaper had peeled into curled tongues. The old family photos were still on the walls, faces warped by dampness and time. One of them stopped him cold, a photograph of the Millhaven Carnival taken decades ago. In the background, half shadowed beneath the striped tent, stood a man with his arm around a young woman. The man was wearing his face. Not similar, identical. The same eyes, the same scar near his brow, the same faint smirk. He stumbled backward, knocking the frame from the wall. The glass shattered at his feet. Behind the photo, wedged into the frame, was a folded piece of yellowed paper. He unfolded it carefully. It was a letter. "To whoever bears this mark after me, the amulet is not protection. It is a debt. Each generation, the curse renews itself in blood. One must die at 20, or the carnival returns to claim them both. I tried to break it once. I failed. If you read this, forgive me. A.M. Monsieur Arthur Morgan, his grandmother's fiancé." The next days blurred together. Alex stopped sleeping. He pored over every inch of that cabin, old journals, newspaper clippings, fragments of burned photographs. Every 20 years, like clockwork, there had been incidents, disappearances, fire, freak accidents, and always the same symbol, a circle divided by a fork carved into nearby trees or painted on debris. The same mark etched faintly into the back of his amulet. It wasn't protection. It was a key. And Sarah had used it to save him. The thought tore him open. He could still feel the warmth of her hands pushing him away, her whisper as the mirror shattered. "The amulet needed a sacrifice, Alex. You're safe now." But he wasn't safe. He was unfinished, because if she had taken his place, if she had entered that reflection meant for him, then she was still there, somewhere between the glass and the air, still trapped in that wrong half of reality. It was raining when he went back to the field. The grass had regrown, but the spiral impressions were still faintly visible under the water pooling in the soil. He stood in the center, soaked and shaking, and took the amulet from his pocket. It was red now, split down the middle, but inside the crack, something glowed. A sliver of light, flickering softly, like someone's pulse. He heard her voice in it, faint, trembling, almost drowned in static. "Alex, you weren't supposed to come back." His knees gave out. The amulet dropped from his hand and landed in the mud. Pulsing brighter, faster, the air around him began to shift, the smell of burnt sugar and iron filling his lungs. And then, faintly, the music started. The carnival song, slow, warped, the melody winding up from nowhere, circling him. Lights flickered to life in the fog, distant, golden, swaying gently, as if hung from unseen stalls. The outline of the Ferris wheel reappeared against the mist, broken but beautiful. The carnival had returned. He moved forward, barefoot in the wet grass, toward the carousel. The horses were shattered, their eyes hollow. The mirrors on the ride were fogged with breath. He reached one, a tall mirror with a thin crack across its center, and wiped the surface with his sleeve. Sarah stood on the other side. Her reflection was pale, her dress soaked in red light, her smile small and unbearably sad. "You shouldn't have come," she whispered. He pressed his hand against the glass. "Sarah, please. I can bring you back." "No," she said softly. "Someone has to stay." He shook his head. "Then I'll stay. I'll take your place." She laughed, the sound like a bell breaking. "That's not how fate works, Alex. You can't pay the same debt twice." The crack in the mirror widened. The glass began to tremble. "Go," she said. "Live. That's the point of the curse, to make sure someone keeps living." The lights around him began to flicker violently, the sound of the carousel rising into a scream. Alex shouted her name once, twice, and then the mirror burst apart, shards scattering like birds into the night. The music stopped. The lights went out. When he opened his eyes, it was morning. The carnival was gone. Only the amulet remained, now gray, lifeless, cracked open to reveal a hollow inside. He turned it over in his palm. On the inner surface, etched so faintly he almost missed it, were words in small, delicate script. "For you," in every reflection. Months later, people in Millhaven started talking again, about the nightlights seen flickering over the old fairgrounds, about a young woman's laughter echoing faintly from the woods, about a boy who never aged a day after 20. Alex didn't speak of it. He left town soon after, moving from city to city, never staying long. But sometimes, in motel mirrors or the reflection on a rain-slick street, he thought he saw her walking beside him, just out of sync. The curse wasn't broken, only rewritten. And the next time someone turned 20, somewhere in the Morgan bloodline, the carnival would return, waiting, as always, for the one who'd lost their charm. The letter came in winter. It was written on thick, cream-colored paper, folded twice, sealed with a red wax emblem shaped like a carousel horse. There was no return address, only a single line of neat handwriting on the front, to Mr. Alexander Morgan, or his heir. And Alex found it wedged beneath his apartment door when he came home from work, the hallway silent, the air oddly cold. He stared at it for a long time before touching it, his fingertips hesitant, his pulse quickening in his throat. For a brief second, the wax seal seemed warm. He broke it open. Inside was a single sheet. "You are cordially invited to attend the reopening of the Millhaven Carnival on the night of your successor's 20th birthday. Attendance is not optional. A.M." M. He dropped the letter. The initials. The same as the man from the photo, Arthur Morgan. The same signature he'd found in that letter decades ago. Except it had been 20 years since the carnival, and that meant someone else had turned 20. Alex's daughter Alara was sitting on the living room floor when he came in, headphones in, sketching carnival tents and dancers in her notebook. "Hey, Dad," she said absently. "Do you know what Grandma used to call this place? The Festival of Mirrors. Kinda cool, right?" He froze. Where did you hear that? She shrugged, flipping the page. Found some of Grandma's old letters in the attic. Thought I'd draw something for my art project. It's due next week. And for what? He crossed the room and took the notebook gently from her hands. The sketches were eerily familiar. The Ferris wheel, the mirror house, even the amulet carved with its old forked circle symbol. Alara, he said quietly, I need you to listen to me. If anyone invites you to a carnival or a fair or anything like that, you tell me, okay? You don't go. She blinked, half smiling. Dad, you're scaring me. There hasn't been a carnival here in years. I'm serious. His voice was sharper than he meant. Promise me. She sighed, raising both hands. Okay, I promise. But that night, after he'd gone to bed, she stayed awake scrolling through her phone. At 12:01 a.m., a notification blinked across her screen. Millhaven Carnival one night only. Reopening Saturday at midnight. Free admission for guests aged 20. The invitation pulsed faintly, as if alive. Alara smiled, without knowing why. 3 nights later, Alex woke to the sound of the front door creaking open. Alara, he called out. No answer. He stumbled to the hallway, heart pounding. The house eerily silent except for the soft tick-tick-tick of the clock. Her shoes were gone. Her jacket missing. On the counter, she had left her phone screen still lit. The message read, Don't worry, Dad. Just gonna see it for myself. It's probably nothing. I'll be back before dawn. He was out the door before finishing the note. The Millhaven field hadn't changed. Even after all these years, the grass still refused to grow evenly where the carnival once stood. But as Alex approached, the air shifted, thickening, humming. The smell of smoke and sugar returned, and in the mist of headlights, yellow, blue, red, the faint strains of carnival music echoing through the fog just as he remembered. He whispered her name, Alara, but the fog swallowed his voice whole. He stepped into the light. The carnival was alive again. Booths lined the path, painted bright and peeling. The Ferris wheel turned slowly against a starless sky. The carousel horses gleamed with wet lacquer, and in the center stood the house of mirrors. He approached it like a man approaching a grave. The mirrors inside pulsed faintly, rippling with reflections that didn't belong to him. Children laughing, couples dancing, a woman in red whispering, Helade? The reflections turned. Dozens of faces, all of them, his daughters at different ages, smiling, crying, staring. And then one voice among them whispered, You're late. A tall figure stepped out from between the mirrors. Arthur Morgan, or what remained of him. His body was thin, almost transparent, as though made of smoke. His eyes burned faintly. I warned you, he said. The bloodline always pays. Where is she? Alex shouted. Where's my daughter? Arthur tilted his head, smiling faintly. Inside the debt, where all of us go. Every 20 years, the amulet chooses its heir. I broke it, Alex said. Sarah's sacrifice only postponed it, Arthur interrupted. You didn't end the curse, boy. You just changed who it would take next. The mirrors shuddered. In one, Alex saw Alara running through the carnival calling his name. In another, she was standing at the carousel, her reflection older, her eyes hollow. She doesn't belong here. Hi. Arthur's expression softened, almost pitying. Neither did I. But the carnival isn't about belonging. It's about balance. He reached out, his hand passing through the air. The amulet Alex had hidden for 20 years burned hot against his chest, glowing red. You kept it, Arthur said. Good. Then it can choose again. The mirrors burst into light. Alex screamed as he was pulled forward, the amulet searing his skin, dragging him through glass into the reflection world beyond. He landed on the other side in silence. The carnival was the same, yet inverted. The lights were cold, the laughter backward. The air smelled of rust and candle smoke. Alara, he called again. She appeared near the carousel, her reflection fractured across the mirrors behind her. Dad? He ran to her, pulling her close. For a moment, Everything was real, her heartbeat, her breath, her warmth. Then she pulled back slightly and whispered, "You shouldn't have come." His chest tightened. "No, I'm here to take you home." She shook her head. "It's too late. The amulet called me. It's our turn." He grabbed her shoulders. "No, listen to me. There's always a way out. Someone always survives. I did." Her eyes glistened. "That's the problem." Then, the mirrors trembled again. The reflections flickering between her face and Sarah's. Between his daughter and the woman he'd lost. Arthur's voice echoed through the glass. "Each time one must stay. But if both remain, the carnival breaks." The air began to hum. The lights snapping. Reality splitting open at its seams. Alara looked at him terrified, determined. "Then let's break it," she whispered. She grabbed the amulet from his chest. It pulsed violently, filling the mirrored world with red light. The reflection cracked outward like lightning, revealing blackness underneath. "Ilara, stop." But she smiled. The same sad smile her mother once had. "I'm not sacrificing, Dad, I'm choosing." She pressed the amulet into the mirror's heart and stepped forward. The glass shattered completely. A sound that wasn't sound. A collapse of everything between light and memory. Alex screamed, reaching for her, but she was gone. The carnival vanished with her. He woke on the field again. Morning light. Silence. No lights. No Ferris wheel. In his hand, the amulet, now cracked cleanly in two. On its inside, 2 words freshly carved. Dead settled. For the first time in generations, the Morgan line would see 21. But sometimes, late at night, Alex swears he can hear laughter in the mirrors of his home. His daughter's voice, joyful, echoing faintly through the glass. Not trapped, just watching. Because maybe the carnival wasn't gone at all. Maybe it had only changed shape. And maybe, one day, when another family finds that red wax letter under their door, they'll see the same words again rewritten by another hand. "You are cordially invited." The butcher's hand. It started with a cut small, shallow, stupid. The kind of wound a man like Sam wouldn't even bother to wash. He'd been out by the shed, splitting frozen ribs of pork with a cleaver older than his marriage. The blade had slipped on the slick bone, caught the edge of his left palm. A red smile opened there, grinning up at him. He cursed, spat, wrapped it in the rag from his pocket, and kept working. The cold would stop the bleeding soon enough, he figured. By evening it hadn't. When the last light drained out of the cypress trees beyond his property, Sam stumbled into the kitchen, his hand trembling under a soaked bandage. The rag was stiff and black, with blood. He peeled it away and stared. The cut was wider now, not deep, not clean, but wrong. The flesh around it looked pale, puckered like something had been trying to crawl out instead of in. He could still feel it. A steady, crawling itch beneath the skin. He hissed as he cleaned it, dousing it in vodka and wrapping it again with gauze. The house creaked behind him. A cold wind pressed against the windows. The sound reminded him of breath. Sam lived alone now. At least, mostly. The farmhouse was old. Louisiana old wooden beams. Wallpaper that peeled in the humidity. Floors that always seemed damp. The swamp encroached every year, inching closer to the porch. His wife had hated it here. His daughter, even more. He told himself he didn't mind the solitude. But the truth was, the silence had teeth. That night, the tapping began. At first it was faint, like rain ticking against the siding, but it wasn't raining. Sam froze, head cocked. The sound came from behind the drywall near the kitchen window. 3 soft taps. Then nothing. Then 3 again. He stared at the wall, until the air felt too thick to breathe. "Just rats," he muttered. Or the wind. He turned up the volume on the TV static and late-night news and sat with a bottle of beer pressed against his wounded hand. The cold made it throb. When he finally dragged himself to bed, the tapping followed, faint and steady, like fingers drumming on the inside of the walls. At dawn, Sam found blood on the floorboards. Not much, just a few drops by the hallway leading to the shed. He thought maybe he'd bled in the night, half asleep. But the pattern was strange. Not smeared or scattered, but neat, like prints. 5 of them. He wiped them up, muttering curses. The dog he used to have, a mutt named Rusty, would have barked his head off at something like that. But Rusty'd been gone for years. Died of old age, buried out behind the barn. Or maybe not buried deep enough. The thought hit him like a cold draft. Sam clenched his hand, wincing as the pain shot up his arm. The itch was still there, worse now. He swore he felt movement under the skin, a pulse that wasn't his own. That evening, Sam brought in the old DV camcorder from the shed. The thing was caked in dust, one of those square-shouldered Sony models from the 2000s. He hadn't touched it since the accident. He told himself he wanted to record his wound to see how it changed, maybe check for infection. But when he pressed play, the camera whirred to life with a sound like grinding teeth. Static. Then flashes headlights on a wet highway. Screams. The sound of something metal scraping asphalt. A crash. Abrupt. And sickening. Then darkness. Sam's breath caught. He remembered that night. Or rather, he remembered enough to know he shouldn't. The woman had come out of nowhere, running through the storm. He'd swerved, lost control, hit the embankment. When he came to, she was lying there, half under the truck. He didn't check if she was breathing. He just dragged her off the road, her hair tangled in his hands, and he stopped the tape. That wasn't on there. It couldn't be. The camcorder had been lying in the mud, cracked and half dead. He hadn't even looked at the footage since. But somehow, in that blur of static and headlights, he thought he saw a flash of her hand reaching toward the lens. Pale, thin, broken, and then the sound. Tap, 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 just like on his walls. That night, he woke to the smell of rot. It was faint at first, like spoiled meat left out too long. He followed it to the kitchen, flicked on the light. The garbage was empty. The sink was clean, but his hand had swollen to twice its size, the bandage wet with something dark. When he peeled it away, a grayish film clung to the wound. The skin beneath looked soft, mushy. He could swear he saw something move inside. Sam staggered back, nearly dropping, the camera still clutched in his other hand. The itch turned to burning. He pressed the lens close, whispering to himself, "It's just infection, that's all, it's just infection." But when the focus sharpened, what filled the tiny screen made his stomach turn. Something white and slick glistened beneath the torn skin. It wasn't maggots, not pus. It looked like a fingertip, a nail. He threw the camera. It hit the wall and clattered to the floor, the screen cracking but still glowing faintly. The image kept rolling, jittering, showing just enough for him to see the fingers twitch, slowly, from inside the wound. He didn't sleep that night. He sat in the kitchen, with his hands submerged in a bowl of bleach and vodka, trembling as the liquid frothed and hissed. Every few minutes, he thought he heard it, that faint tapping again, this time not from the wall, but from the inside of his own hand. He tried to ignore it. He tried to pray, but every word caught in his throat. At some point, the power went out. The house fell into a darkness so thick it felt solid. The only sound left was his breathing, and the soft, patient sound of fingers drumming on the table beside him. He looked down. His left hand lay still, pale and limp under the light of the dying battery lamp. But next to it, wet and glistening on the wooden table, was another hand. Smaller, female, its nails torn, its skin gray. It rested there for a second, twitching once. Then it slid back into the darkness. Sam screamed until his throat was raw. But no one came. The next morning the sun rose pale and weak, casting long, muddy light through the curtains. Sam was still in the chair, his bandaged hand pressed tight against his chest. He'd wrapped it so many times it looked like a cocoon. He could still hear the tapping. This time, it came from inside the wall again, closer to the bedroom. 3 taps, pause, 3 more, like a heartbeat. Sam stood. The floorboards groaned beneath him. His hand throbbed, each pulse syncing with the sound. And somewhere behind that wall, something was waiting to get out. Sam hadn't left the house in 3 days. He told himself he was sick, that he just needed rest. But he knew the truth. He was scared to open the door, scared that something would follow him out, or worse, that it already had. The wound on his hand had turned black around the edges. The swelling had gone down, but only because the skin had split open, oozing a thin brownish fluid that smelled faintly of rust. He tried to tape it shut, but the flesh kept separating, as if his body wanted it open, wanted something inside to breathe. At night, he wrapped the arm in towels soaked with alcohol. He'd wake up to find the bandages gone, lying in shreds across the floor. The first time it happened, he thought he'd torn them off in his sleep. By the third time, he wasn't so sure. There were marks on the wood near his bed. Thin, shallow scratches, 5 parallel lines spaced evenly apart, like fingers. On the fourth night, the flies came. He woke to the sound of buzzing, soft but insistent, somewhere near the window. At first, he thought it was just the swamp, another sound in the endless orchestra of decay outside. But when he turned on the lamp, he saw them, dozens of them, swarming near the ceiling, fat and slow, their bodies shimmering with a wet sheen. He killed 3 before realizing they weren't coming from outside. They were coming from inside the wall. He pressed his ear against the plaster and froze. Beneath the faint hum of their wings, he heard something else. A low, rhythmic tapping, wet and patient, like flesh slapping against wood. That sound again. He stepped back, hand trembling, eyes darting to the corner where he'd seen the other hand, the gray one, only nights before. Nothing there now, only his shadow, stretched long and thin by the flickering bulb. "Get a grip," he whispered. "You're losing your damn mind." But when he looked down, the blood had begun seeping through the new bandage again. Not from the cut, from somewhere deeper, pulsing under the skin. He didn't answer the phone when it rang. It was his daughter's number, her voice chirping through the static on voicemail. "Dad, are you okay? You sound weird lately. Call me back, please." He couldn't call her back. Couldn't let her see him like this. She'd always said the house smelled like rot, even before all this. Maybe she'd been right. He shuffled to the bathroom, half drunk on whatever was left in the bottle, and peeled the gauze off once more. The wound had split wider deep enough now to glimpse the sinew beneath. But it wasn't just blood and tissue anymore. Something white curled beneath the skin, twitching like muscle. He leaned closer. It looked like bone. No, not bone. A finger. It was pushing through from underneath, pale, too small to be his own. The nail cracked and discolored. Sam gagged and stumbled back, knocking over the mirror. It shattered across the tile, a dozen reflections of his bleeding hand staring back at him from the shards. In every fragment, he saw a different version of himself. One where the wound was clean, one where the whole arm was gone, and in one, just one, he swore he saw her face behind him, the woman from the accident, her eyes wide, her mouth open, whispering something he couldn't hear. He slammed his fist against the wall and screamed until the pain drowned everything else out. He tried to burn the footage that night, dragged the old DV camera to the fire pit out back, doused it in lighter fluid, and watched the flames chew through the plastic. The smell was thick and oily. When it was done, he stood there for a long time, staring at the ashes. But when he came back inside, the camera was sitting on the kitchen table, blackened, cracked, smoke still rising from its body. He didn't touch it. He just stared as it flickered to life on its own. The screen glowed dimly, showing the same grainy footage. The highway, the headlights, the rain, then her hand, reaching up from the pavement. But this time, it moved. It pointed directly at the lens, and behind the sound of the storm came another, the soft, wet tapping, now faster, urgent, tap, 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 then silence. Then, from the speaker, a faint voice, "Give it back." Sam dropped the camera. It hit the floor and kept playing, the screen rolling in static. He backed away until his legs hit the counter, his wounded hand pressed against his chest, his heartbeat hammering beneath the bandages. That night, he dreamed of the crash, He could smell the gasoline, hear the rain pounding on metal. The headlights flickered in and out, revealing her face in flashes, young, terrified, her lips forming words he couldn't hear. Her arm was pinned under the wheel, her other hand stretched toward him, pleading. But in the dream, he wasn't trying to help her. He was holding the cleaver, the same one he used in the shed, the one that slipped. He swung it down. Once, twice. When he woke, his bed was soaked. His arm hung off the side, blood pooling on the floor. He staggered to his feet, dizzy and weak, and saw something that froze his breath. The bandages were gone again. His hand, what was left of it, looked alien. The skin had peeled away, revealing cords of tendon that glistened in the dim light. And at the wrist, a line of black veins crawled upward, branching toward his elbow like roots. The fingers twitched on their own. He tried to move them. They didn't listen. By morning, he could barely feel the arm. The flesh was cold, numb, except for that terrible, constant itch deep inside, where no scratching could reach. He sat in the kitchen again, the walls sweating in the humidity, and watched the sunlight leak through the blinds like thin knives. Every sound made him flinch. Every shadow seemed to shift. He started talking to himself, muttering, pleading, apologizing to no one. He told himself it wasn't real, that this was guilt, punishment, delirium. But the more he tried to reason, the clearer it became that something was listening. Sometimes, between the gaps of his words, he could hear the replies. Soft. Female, you left me there. You cut me. You buried the wrong body. He pressed his hands to his ears, screamed, threw dishes until the air was full of shattering glass. The voice didn't stop. It just grew quieter, moving from his head into the walls, into the very bones of the house. And then the tapping began again. He found his wife's rosary that afternoon, tangled in the drawer where she used to keep her recipe cards. The beads were sticky, dark with something that wasn't dust. He clutched it tight, whispering the only prayer he remembered from childhood. But every time he said, "Amen," the tapping answered. 3 taps. Then silence, like it was mocking him. That night, the tapping turned into scratching. He followed it down the hallway to the bedroom. The noise came from behind the closet door. Something moving inside. He reached for the handle, his whole body shaking, his dead hand twitching uncontrollably. When he pulled the door open, a wave of stench hit him. Sweet, rotten, like wet earth and meat left in the Sunday inside. Hanging from the rail was his old coat, the one he'd worn the night of the crash. Its pocket was moving. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he reached in. His fingers brushed something soft, cold. He pulled it out, a handful of damp soil, and something else tangled within it. A bracelet. Not his wife's. He knew that bracelet. A cheap plastic band with blue beads. The woman's. The one he'd hit. He dropped it and stumbled back, gasping. But before he could move, something clamped around his wrist. His bad wrist. The bracelet. It tightened like wire, digging into the skin. The flesh around it split, the wound yawning open again, wider than before. He screamed, tried to tear it off, but the skin beneath was peeling away in strips now, curling like paper in flame. Beneath it, the veins pulsed black, thick, spreading. The house groaned around him. Somewhere inside the walls, something moved. By midnight, Sam had lost most of his sanity. He sat in the living room, his arm wrapped in towels, his breath shallow and ragged. The TV flickered on by itself, the same footage again. The crash, the hand, the voice. "You took my body, Sam. Now I'll take yours." The words weren't from the recording. They came from right beside him. He turned. No one there. But his left hand was moving again, fingers flexing, curling, gripping the arm of the chair. Slowly, painfully, it began to turn toward him as if it were no longer his own. "Stop," he whispered. "Stop. Please." The hand twitched once, then twice. Then it snapped upright and clawed at his throat. He fought it, choking, eyes wide, his own arm tightening around his neck like a serpent. He slammed it against the wall, again and again, until the bones cracked, until the fingers went limp. When he finally collapsed, sobbing, the hand hung at a crooked angle, broken, useless. But in the silence that followed, the tapping came back from inside his chest. He sat there for hours, gasping, listening. The sound was faint at first, like a heart beating in reverse. Each thud came from deeper inside, each one slower, colder. He realized then that it wasn't just the house decaying. It was him, his flesh, his soul, the guilt festering in both, until it rotted through the bone. When the first fly landed on his wrist, he didn't bother brushing it away. Another joined it, then another. Within minutes, his entire arm was crawling with them, their wings whispering in the dim light and in the low, steady buzz. He thought he heard the same voice again, smiling now, satisfied, almost done. The house no longer smelled like rot. It smelled like metal now, raw, sharp, alive. Sam noticed it as soon as he woke, the taste of iron thick in his throat. His tongue was dry, sticking to the roof of his mouth. For a moment, he thought he'd bitten himself during the night. But when he lifted his head, he saw the blood wasn't his. It was dripping from the ceiling, slow, steady drops landing in the bowl of his cereal, turning the milk pink. He looked up. A small crack had split across the plaster. The sound behind it was faint, rhythmic, like something breathing inside the walls. He stood up too fast and almost fell. His arm hung uselessly at his side, wrapped in what used to be a white towel but was now stiff with dried blood. He could feel the dead weight of it swinging heavy, foreign, attached to him only by the stubbornness of bone. He wanted to cut it off. He'd been thinking about it for days now, but the thought made him sick. Every time he tried to pick up the knife, the fingers twitched and he'd freeze, waiting to see if they'd move again. They always did. He avoided the mirrors now. Every reflection carried something wrong. Sometimes the hand looked normal again. Sometimes it wasn't there at all. But the worst were the times he saw it move before he did, its fingers stretching, its wrist flexing, almost waving to him. It was around noon when the phone rang again. The sound shattered the heavy silence of the house. Sam jumped, knocking a glass off the table. It exploded across the floor, scattering tiny, sharp reflections of himself. He didn't move. The ringing went on, shrill, impatient. Then it stopped. A second later, the answering machine clicked on. "Dad? It's me. I'm coming over. You haven't answered in a week." And Sam lunged forward and tore the plug from the wall. The message cut off mid-sentence. His heart hammered. "No," he whispered. "Not here. Not now." He couldn't let her see this. Couldn't let her see him. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time after that, staring at his arm. The skin had begun to slough off in patches. Underneath, the tendons gleamed like red wire. He could see movement inside. Not pulse, not muscle contraction, but something shifting, sliding beneath the surface like a worm in the soil. The smell was unbearable, sweet and foul, like fruit left to rot in a closed room. He reached for the whiskey bottle on the nightstand and poured the rest over the wound. The liquid hissed. For a heartbeat, he thought he heard it laugh. He grabbed the roll of duct tape from the drawer, wrapped it around his wrist, layer after layer, until the hand was a gray, mummified lump. Then he took the cleaver from the kitchen drawer, the same one he'd sworn never to touch again. He set it on the bed beside him. His breathing slowed. The world seemed to narrow the dim room, the trembling blade, the faint sound of flies whispering against the window. Everything outside those few feet of air ceased to exist. He raised the cleaver, but the moment the metal touched the skin, his arm jerked away. The muscles locked, the fingers spasmed, the taped hand clawed at the air. He tried again, and again the hand fought back, wrenching itself from his control. It slammed against the wall. Again and again, the sound of duct tape tearing and bones cracking. He screamed, grabbing his wrist with the other hand, trying to hold it still. But it was stronger, far stronger than anything dead should be. "Let go," he shouted. "It's mine." The hand twisted sharply and he heard a sound, a pop, wet and final as something tore loose inside. The pain was blinding. He fell back onto the bed, vision swimming, his ears filled with the roar of his own heartbeat. When his eyes cleared, he saw it. The hand was hanging by a thread of skin and sinew, twitching. It curled once, twice, like testing itself, and then tore free. For a moment, there was silence. Sam lay there, gasping, staring at the thing on the floor. It didn't bleed the way it should have. The wound was dry, the flesh around it already darkened, cauterized by something unseen. The hand lay still for a heartbeat, then began to move. The fingers flexed, slow and deliberate. The wrist rotated with a crackling sound, like wood splitting. Then, impossibly, the hand began to crawl, dragging itself forward, nails scraping against the wooden floorboards. Sam screamed and kicked it away. It hit the wall, slid down, and vanished beneath the bed. He scrambled backward, clutching the bleeding stump against his chest, tears blurring his vision. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." The house answered him with a soft, wet tap, tap, tap from beneath the floorboards. Then, another sound, a thud from inside the walls. Then another. Then many. Something was moving, crawling, multiplying. He stumbled into the hallway, clutching his arm. Blood smeared the walls where he leaned. His vision pulsed in and out, the edges dimming. He thought he heard voices, whispers, echoes, laughter, not coming from behind him but from inside him, echoing through the hollow space where the hand used to be. "Sam," a voice breathed. "You gave me my freedom." He froze. It was her voice, the woman from the crash. Low, gentle, terrifyingly close. "Now I'll give you yours." He turned toward the sound and saw movement at the end of the hallway, something pale emerging from the shadows. Not a woman, not anymore. Just fragments, pieces stitched together from memory and guilt. A face that changed every time he blinked. Hair dripping black water. Eyes hollow and shining. And crawling behind her dozens of hands. Some burned, some bone white, all moving in unison like spiders. Sam backed away, heart pounding. "Stay back," he shouted. "You're not real." "And," she smiled, "you made me real." The lights flickered. Every bulb in the house exploded at once, plunging everything into darkness. He could still hear them, the skittering, the scraping, the wet rustle of flesh against floorboards. He stumbled into the kitchen, groping for the drawers, his fingers closing around something sharp, a boning knife. He turned as the first hand reached the doorway. It was his. He could see the tattoo on the wrist, the scar by the thumb. It dragged itself toward him, leaving a smear of black-red behind. He swung the knife down, slicing through it, but another one came crawling after, then another, until the floor was alive with them. They swarmed him, climbing his legs, his back gripping his neck. He screamed, shaking them off, cutting blindly. Fingers flew, nails scraped. The air was filled with the stink of blood and burning skin. But for every hand he cut down, another emerged from under the fridge, from the drain, from the cracks in the wall, crawling toward him, whispering in 100 broken voices. "You took our lives. Now we take your body." He ran, through the hall, down the stairs, into the basement. The door slammed behind him, sealing him in with the dark. The air was thick, with mold and damp earth. His breath came in ragged gasps, echoing off the concrete walls. He stumbled toward the workbench where his old tools lay, the saw, the hammer, the cleaver. Everything was coated in dust, but one thing gleamed clean, the handsaw. He grabbed it. The stump of his arm was twitching again, the veins pulsing like they were alive. The voice whispered through them, gentle, coaxing, "Finish what you started." He screamed and brought the saw down, hacking at the flesh. The pain was beyond sound, beyond thought. His vision fractured into light and shadow, every breath a tear through his ribs. The saw bit deeper, the sound wet and sharp, until it hit bone. He sawed through, and when it was done he fell to his knees, the world spinning around him. The severed limb lay beside him, still twitching. He thought it was over. But then he saw the other arm. The fingers were moving. The decay had spread faster than he realized. The black veins were crawling up his neck now, tracing thin, inky lines across his jaw. His skin felt tight, brittle. Inside, something shifted, a coldness blooming from his chest outward, like frost under the skin. He dragged himself toward the stairs, leaving a trail behind him. The air grew heavier, darker, as if the house itself was breathing through him. At the top of the stairs, the door opened on its own. A figure stood there, silhouetted by the faint orange glow of dawn. His daughter. "Dad?" she whispered. "Oh my God, what happened?" Sam tried to speak, but no sound came out. His throat was full of blood. He reached for her, but the arm he lifted wasn't his own. It was pale, wrong, and dripping. The fingers curled toward her face. Her eyes widened. "Dad, stop." He couldn't. He wasn't in control anymore. His body jerked forward, the hand lunging like a snake. He fought it, screaming silently, trying to pull it back. Inside, the voice purred, "Too late." And then everything went red. When he came to, she was gone. The front door hung open, the morning light creeping in like an accusation. His hands, both of them, were slick with blood. He didn't know whose. He fell to his knees in the middle of the living room, staring at the walls. They pulsed faintly, breathing in rhythm with him. The air buzzed. The floor creaked. The tapping returned not from outside this time, but from within him, deep beneath the ribs. Tap, tap, tap. He laughed, or maybe cried, until his voice broke. In the corner of the room, the DV camera flickered to life one last time. On the tiny screen, he saw himself kneeling exactly where he was now, staring at something on the floor. Then the camera tilted down. A hand, crawling toward the lens. His voice on the tape, hoarse, terrified. God. It's still moving. The recording cut to static. And above the hiss, faint but clear, came the whisper, "Not yet." Answer. Sam woke up to the sound of flies. They were everywhere. 1,000 tiny whining wings scratching at his skull. He sat up in bed, gasping, and the first thing he saw was the handprint. It was smeared on the wall above the dresser. Red, greasy, shaped like something that had been pressed there recently, a palm too wide, fingers too long. The mark was still wet. He clutched his injured wrist and stumbled backward. No. No, you're not real. But the buzzing didn't stop. It came from inside the wall, this time muffled, as though something were writhing beneath the plaster. The tapping sound that had haunted him for weeks began again, slow and deliberate. Tap, 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 then silence. Sam grabbed the old baseball bat from under his bed and slammed it against the wall. "You hear me? I'm not afraid of you," he shouted. The drywall cracked under his blow. A chunk of it crumbled and fell, and behind it something pale and soft pulsed once, like flesh. He dropped the bat. When he leaned closer, he saw a knuckle pressing out from the hole, skin white as wax. The hand, the one he'd cut from that poor bastard on the highway months ago, was inside his wall. Sam stumbled back. He tripped over the nightstand and fell hard. The lamp shattered. The room went dark, except for the flickering TV across from the bed still playing the frozen frame from the DV tape he'd been too scared to destroy. A man's arm, blood pouring in ribbons, the lens catching a single severed hand twitching on the asphalt. Now that hand was here. The sound grew wet, something dragging, slapping, pulling itself free. The hole widened drywall, bending outward until a slick, pale shape crawled into view. Fingers curled around the edge of the plaster, digging in. Nails blackened and split. It was pulling itself into the light. Sam screamed and ran for the door. It didn't open. The lock turned, but the handle refused to budge. The buzzing of flies turned deafening, as though they filled the entire room. Then came the voice. "You cut me. Now I'll cut you." It wasn't human, it was the hiss of air through blood. Sam turned, clutching his bleeding wrist. It wasn't me. It was an accident. The hand slid fully out from the wall now, dragging a line of blood across the floor as it crawled toward him, palm down, like a spider. It moved with a hideous, coordinated purpose. Sam stumbled to the other side of the room, knocking over a dresser. His reflection in the cracked mirror behind him was shaking, but his reflection didn't move in sync. It stared back with an empty smile. Sam, he froze. What? Look where you are. He turned, slowly. The wallpaper was gone. The room was changing, warping around him like melting wax. Hooks appeared along the ceiling, swinging slightly. Rusted meat cleavers gleamed in impossible light. The floorboards darkened, stained with what looked like years of blood. The air was thick with rot and the metallic tang of iron. He was standing in a butcher's room. No, this isn't real. But it was real enough that when one of the hooks swung toward him, it sliced open his shoulder. The pain was sharp, hot, real. Blood poured down his arm. Sam screamed and stumbled, pressing against the slick wall. His reflection still grinned at him through the gory mirror, but now the reflection was missing a hand. You took what wasn't yours. The voice again overlapping, echoing from every surface. The severed hand crawled toward his feet and stopped. Then, impossibly, it flexed its fingers and pointed upward, toward his own arm, the one wrapped in bandages, the one that hadn't stopped festering. It looked down. The gauze was soaked through. He tore it off, trembling, and saw movement beneath his skin, veins bulging, muscles twitching. The flesh of his forearm rippled, as though something was inside it. You gave me your body, Sam. The whisper came again. Now I'll give you mine. The skin split. Sam screamed as a pale finger burst out of the wound, followed by another, then another. A second hand was clawing its way out of his arm, tearing him open from the inside. He tried to grab it, to pull it free, but it latched onto him instead, gripping his throat, tightening, choking. His vision blurred. The room spun, hooks swinging like pendulums. Everywhere he looked, hands reached from the walls, dozens of them, crawling, writhing, clenching. They were his victims. The ones he had butchered. The ones whose pieces he'd buried in the bayou. Their fingers brushed his cheeks, their nails dug into his scalp. Sam fell to his knees, gasping. Please stop, I'll make it right. The reflection spoke again. This time, it wasn't smiling. You can't undo what's been cut. The mirror shattered. Glass rained over him. Every shard reflected a different version of himself. 100 Sams, all with missing hands, missing eyes, missing souls. The crawling hand crept onto his chest and pressed its palm against his heart. Its touch was cold, colder than death. You know what comes next. Sam understood. His eyes rolled back. He reached toward the nightstand, where the old butcher's cleaver lay, the same one he'd hidden all these years. He gripped it tight. His injured arm shook, with a howl that was more animal than human. He raised the cleaver high. The hand squeezed harder, and Sam brought the blade down. The scream that followed was not his alone. It was layered, an orchestra of voices crying out from behind the walls. Blood sprayed across the mattress, the ceiling, the flickering TV screen. The severed limb hit the floor with a wet thud. Then silence. The hooks stopped swinging. The flies vanished. The room went still, a farmhouse bedroom once again. Sam lay on the floor, breathing shallowly, one arm gone. His eyes flickered toward the camera on the dresser, the DV camera, its red light blinking. He dragged himself toward it, leaving a smear of blood behind. I'm sorry, he croaked. The last thing the lens caught was his trembling face, and behind him, just barely in frame, the dismembered hand twitching one final time before crawling away into the darkness beneath the bed. When the deputies arrived at the farmhouse, it was already morning. Mist clung to the fields, curling through the half-broken fence posts. while the house itself loomed like a mausoleum at the edge of the property, its shutters hanging loose, its windows filmed over with grime. Inside, everything smelled of copper and decay. Deputy Claire Matheson held her sleeve to her face. "Christ," she muttered. "What the hell happened here?" Her partner, Officer Dent, flicked on his body cam. The red light blinked once. "Dispatch," said the neighbor heard screaming around 3 a.m. Thought it was coyotes. They stepped into the living room. Blood led up the stairs in uneven smears. Handprints dragged along the banister as though someone had clawed their way up on shaking limbs. "Victim's name, Samuel Miller," Dent said, scanning the ID photo on his tablet. 52. Retired butcher. Previous record for aggravated assault back in the 90s. Wife and daughter, both listed as deceased. Claire frowned. "You think he did this to himself?" Dent gave a low whistle as they reached the top landing. "If he did, I don't ever want to know why." The bedroom looked like it had been painted in red. Blood everywhere on the sheets, the walls, even the ceiling. The smell hit like a punch to the gut. In the center of the floor lay Sam Miller's body, slumped beside the bed, missing his right arm from the elbow down. The stump was crudely wrapped in torn sheets, soaked through and still dripping. Claire crouched beside him. Self-mutilation. Maybe. But look here. Dent pointed with his pen toward the nightstand. A butcher's cleaver, its blade sticky and dark, rested beside an old handheld DV camera, the kind people used 20 years ago. Its recording light was still on. Was he filming himself? Dent didn't answer. He reached for the camera, pressed play. The tiny screen flickered, showing static first, then a grainy image. The same bedroom, hours earlier. Sam Miller was on the bed, pale and sweating, staring into the lens. His voice came out thin and ragged. "If anyone finds this, don't touch the wall. Don't." The feed glitched. A frame of something white moved behind him, a blur like a hand pressing against the wallpaper from the inside. "I didn't mean to. It wasn't supposed to be like that." The camera tilted violently, falling sideways. The next 20 seconds were chaos, shouting, banging, a flash of metal, and then a scream so raw that Claire felt her own spine tighten. When the sound stopped, the image steadied, just long enough to show something impossible. A pale arm slithering across the floorboards toward the lens, the fingers flexing as though searching for something to hold. The recording ended in a burst of static. Claire hit pause and looked at Dent. "Is this a prank?" Dent's expression didn't change. "If it is, he died making it." They bagged the camera and called for the coroner. While waiting, Claire examined the walls. There were faint scratches along one side of the room, long, parallel, and deep, as though made by fingernails. The wallpaper bulged in a few places, like something underneath was pushing outward. She touched it once, gently. The surface was cold and soft. She jerked her hand back. "It's wet." Dent turned. "What?" Behind the wall it's damp, like blood. Before he could respond, the DV camera sealed, and an evidence bag flickered back to life. Its screen glowed red for a second. Then the audio began to play on its own. A faint scratching sound filled the room. Then a whisper. "Help me." Claire froze. That wasn't on the playback before. Dent frowned, kneeling closer. The whisper came again, louder. "Let me out." He shut the camera off immediately. "That's it. We're done here." They left the room. Neither of them noticed that the wallpaper behind the bed had shifted slightly, as if something beneath it had breathed. 3 days later, the coroner's report listed the death as exsanguination due to self-inflicted trauma. The severed arm was never found. Claire couldn't stop thinking about the recording. She'd watched it twice more at the station, alone in the evidence room. Each time, she noticed something new. A face, flickering in the mirror behind Sam. A shadow, moving where no one stood. And at the very end, for exactly one frame, there was a shape that looked unmistakably like a human hand, pressing against the inside of the camera lens. The IT tech said it wasn't possible. That night, she brought the DV camera home. It sat on her kitchen table, wrapped in plastic. She told herself she just wanted to review it one last time before sending it to evidence storage. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. At 2:14 a.m., she turned it on. Static, then darkness. Then faintly, the outline of a bedroom again. But it wasn't Sam Miller's. It was hers. The shot was coming from inside her house. She stood there frozen. On screen, the camera panned slowly across her hallway toward the kitchen. Toward her. "Jesus Christ," she whispered, backing away. A scraping noise came from behind her. She turned nothing. When she looked back, the camera was showing the table directly in front of her, from a low angle. Then a hand appeared on the screen, gray-white, blood-caked, fingers dragging along the lens. Her lights flickered. The whisper came again. The same one she'd heard before, only clearer now. "You watched, now you see." The screen went black. Claire dropped the camera. It hit the floor with a hollow crack. She backed away until her spine pressed against the wall. From somewhere behind her, deep within the plaster, came a slow, deliberate tapping. Tap, tap, tap. The sound followed her down the hallway. 1 week later, Officer Dent sat in the same evidence room, filling out a report. Claire hadn't shown up for her shift in days. He rubbed his eyes, sighed, and looked at the items laid out before him. Sam Miller's cleaver, a sealed plastic bag with bloodied gauze, and the old DV camera. He didn't believe in curses. He believed in people doing terrible things, and in bad luck. Still, he stared at the evidence tag and noticed the camera's light was blinking again. "Claire," he muttered, half joking, "you didn't turn this damn thing off?" He hit play. Static first, then an image. It wasn't Sam's room this time. It was a dimly lit space. Walls streaked with red. Hanging hooks. A cleaver table. The butcher's room. Dent leaned forward, his stomach tightening. A figure sat slumped against the far wall, not Sam, but Claire. Her face was pale, her eyes open but blank, as if she'd been staring for hours. The camera tilted. Behind her, something crawled across the ceiling, white, thin, almost boneless. A hand. Then the recording cut to black. Dent dropped the camera, breathing hard. Jesus. The device emitted one final sound, faint, distorted before the battery died completely. A hand was found, but it belonged to the victim. The room fell silent. And just before Dent turned off the lights, he could swear he saw movement behind the frosted glass of the evidence locker. 5 long fingers pressing slowly against the inside of the door. Every story leaves something behind. A scent, a sound, a shadow that doesn't fade. When the light returns, some say they're just tales. But you and I know better, don't we? Because maybe, somewhere in the dark, there's still a hand knocking behind a wall, a mirror that hasn't stopped reflecting, or a whisper, still asking to be heard. If you ever hear it, don't answer. Just turn off the light and wait for the next transmission.